Right. And streaminating. Still setting up here. Oh, bear with us. Yeah, it looks better, yeah. Get our chat going.
13 hours ago.
What did 13 hours? Oh.
My bite.
Where Jenny got bitted by nature.
Fuck you, nature. Fuck you.
Yep.
After all I've said for you.
I know,
on your behalf.
We're all about the nature, and what happens? Punctured.
You raped my shelter and pillaged my maintenance.
Damn. Okay, be right up. Sorry. Take your time. We're still, setting up the stream here. So, chat pop out. Bear with us, folks. It always takes a minute or so to get into the discussion here, and we're just setting up a few things. Yep. YouTube chat. Quick test. Yeah, so that's working. We got our Portal Mountain lobby. Shoutouts to the peeps who we are about to share the stream with. So they probably couldn't have heard this. Copy the link. Share to Portal Mountain peeps.
Apparently Brian is typing.
There we go. Alright, so I think we're set. We may have some more setting up to do if we have a Zoom call in from our good buddy Corey, who may show up after work, after his shift. That would be in a couple hours, I believe. So for now, let's get right into it. The last stream, we covered probably a chart we can probably pull up right now, but the alpha beta dynamic, the market machine, how it operates to create this sort of hierarchical structure. And let's pull up a chart.
Yeah, I think the chart is missing one key ingredient in terms of how it was originally envisioned, in that there's a stacking element to it that isn't presented in it, and that is when you have a class system where you have a hierarchy of authority, if you will, where there's a transformation of the omega section of the chart into another iteration of the overall chart. So within the omega rectangle, if you will, you could subdivide it up into the same square, and so on and so forth. And depending on how many layers you've got, it does bottom out. But so there's the omega, which is the criminal or the insane or the or whatever the undesirable society has at this point in time.
Right. Yeah, so you can see a fractal structure.
That just hit me. This speaks a little bit to the caste system, the Hindu caste system with the undesirables.
Sure, but it's every structure, every hierarchy, basically, that we're seeing in society. They're all based off of this sort of layering where everyone underneath is nothing to you, basically, except for the layer down. There will be management there, the alphas of that layer. They're your beta, right? You get to tell them what to do, and you don't care what anybody else, you don't care about them. They're all omegas to you,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah, you manage them
all the way
you,
down.
you use the beta as the management, as the facilitator of management for that.
Right.
So you never actually have direct contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we are in a sort of overall big picture here. We are talking about organization of society, how it gets organized, and good audio is working. Yeah, so like big picture, how society is organized. We are presenting a model for understanding that, how hierarchies are formed.
And why?
Yeah, into this alpha beta type of structure, and
Which is an appropriation of terms for anybody in the know
right,
of Reddit and
should go over
whatnot.
that again.
Should probably is probably going to recognize some of these terminologies as being utilized in a very different context. What we're doing with these particular terms here is just sort of adopting them and transforming them, hopefully into something far more meaningful and useful in the effort of articulating than previously had been applied to these words. Like we're not fans of the actual turn of events that brought about these terms into Reddit land.
Yeah. So the terms that we appropriate from all different, we appropriate the shit out of everything, basically.
Right.
But we always try to look at what was the original use, what were they trying to get at, and we try to apply a more robust model that explains and extends much more in a versatile way, while still being somehow true to the original definition. That's what we try to do, right?
Right. So this is where connotation makes more impact than the particular denotation of a word. The denotation is meant to evoke a series of related concepts rather than a single particular definition.
Within our model. Yeah. Yeah, so this comes from the TRP, Red Pill, whatever.
Matrix
Society.
TRP appropriated the Matrix movie. We have done much the same indirectly already, but we've decided on these particular terms to demonstrate an articulation of a mechanism that is extremely painful, or what you would call it, punishing. The systemic mechanism that brings about the spectacle and whatnot. The modern social structure. So the idea behind that is to show how incoherent the concepts are, and this is specifically why these kinds of terms were used, because they trigger the negative connotations associated with being alpha, beta, and all of these things, or dominating kind of dynamics.
Right. Yeah, so it comes from the original Red Pill ideology or whatever. Comes from the Matrix as a metaphor, taking a certain color pill. You take the red pill, you find out the truth, quote unquote, and then you become more powerful or whatever. The blue pill, you just wake up and go back to your job, and Neo doesn't have to choose the red pill, but he does. So that was extended into this community called the Red Pill, where it's basically used to identify...
I need 5 minutes to
picking it up?
Yep, grab food.
Alright. They're not... Alright, so in
They're
5
driving.
minutes.
Yeah, they're driving.
So we'll take a short break in a few minutes. So it's extended to a metaphor to be used in the context of dating relations, sexual relations, in that
the red pill community on Reddit you're talking about.
So
right?
So red pill is like, you take the red pill and you realize how the truth of the sexual relations.
No. They call it the sexual marketplace, a concept we are completely at odds with.
This is just the market machine.
Yeah,
basically.
We're not at odds with that people think this way. We recognize that people think this way, but we also are saying that the market machine as a concept is at odds with what we are
with the polymorphic machine.
with what we are actually trying to present
Or-
as the coherent articulation of
Right.
everything.
So we are juxtaposing, and the last live stream we did was basically one of the first times that we've actually gone in depth into what does the market machine look like and what is the dysmorphic society as a whole. How do you model that and what does it look like?
Yeah, and this is the idea behind this diagram we're seeing, is that it allows for the layering to be very, very not solid, but more like concrete, if you will. It's still a house of cards, in by definition, but because of the belief in the hierarchy, belief in the structure of society that we all carry, it solidifies itself as a reality.
Right. Yeah, and so operating as a sort of cold market in which all of life is commodified and everything is just a commodity, and there's a reification to that as well, in that we gloss over the process that came to make a product and all the impact that it's had on the environment and the people doing that. That's all glossed over in favor of the representation of the image itself when you go to actually buy it.
That's half of what's glossed over. There's also the future of the product, which is basically the most products, as it were, in our society. This is a rough statistic, obviously, but like more than, if I remember correctly, it's more than 50% of it is just destined for the landfill anyway. So not only do we have the situation where we're raping the environment for creation of the over-creation of the product, we have a secondary effect of where those products are not actually needed and they're thrown out and they fill up a landfill of its own. So on destruction on the one end, destruction on the second end, and in the middle there is this small bubble of potential couple months of use of whatever object you've been sold and then thrown out. I gotta go to pick up the food. Just picking up food, guys.
So I'm just thinking, I'm not sure if we're gonna just call it a break right now. The conversational aspect is definitely a bonus, definitely great to have. So we've been juxtaposing the market machine in the last live stream that we did, which is one of the first times that we've ever really gone into such depths about, I guess, as I was saying, the dysmorphic side of things. So what we want to do is this time get into some more basics, I guess, like start from the beginning sort of thing. We're going to be going through the field manual, as we call it, which is one of our primary documentations, and kind of show what this actually looks like. So we're going to jump back into the isomorphic side of things, and we are presenting the Society of the Guild, if you will, which is another name, another way to say the polymorphic machine. And being polymorphic because at every point, at every neural processing point of this type of social organizational structure, you have a unit in context which is able to take in its surroundings and more so make decisions on its own for the whole. So this is bringing back the idea of the strange loop here. We are, with the polymorphic machine, having a complete loop where the individual contains the whole, and that kind of uh, evokes the holonic model that we use as well. So we're going to be going through some basics, and we're going to start with the guild, as we call it, as a holon, and what that's composed of, and then we're going to look at focus, and we're going to notice an isomorphism between these two, which is I think a good highlight of the holonic model itself. So we're going to look at the guild as a holon. We're going to look at focus as a holon, or fitness as a holon. And through looking at these two things, we should be able to see the holonic type of model emerge. And of course, then we're going to carry on through the field manual, up through environment, and how that relates in with Institute and Corp, and various other structures that we noticed. So I'm just going to hit a quick be right back.
Here's your brick.
Nice. is good.
It's how we do.
It is how we do. Yeah, so back to our little chart. In our discussion, we were just saying how this alpha, beta, omega stuff isn't real. It's a subset of reality, if you will.
It's an abstraction that
Right.
is articulated on top of reality because it can be. Let's put it that way. It
Right.
can articulate it, therefore it's there.
And this is a product of the market machine needing certain units to stack in certain ways to make certain structures.
Yeah.
Right? But ultimately, these people, these neural units that we're using to stack here and there, they have a much higher potential to take care of the whole,
Right.
which,
They're
as
prevented
their
from.
job title says, no, you cannot.
You
must-
can't even touch that.
You
yeah.
must listen to what management says, what your alpha says,
Yeah.
and
So
That's that.
so this is like where we see things like an aversion to cross field disciplines.
right,
A lot of people have a hard time accepting somebody not in the specific, not being specialized in a particular field if they have an opinion
Mhm.
about said field, despite its it's the legitimacy of the opinion
Mhm.
becomes not relevant. So it could be legitimate, it could be not legitimate, but that's not the that's not the issue.
The point.
Where we're really seeing here, what we're seeing is that a rejection of the opinion based on the lack of authoritative credentials to speak on
Mhm.
that particular topic.
Right.
So the content of the opinion could be completely dismissed on the grounds of
that you're not hooked into the system.
right.
Yeah.
By not taking the exact specific narrow channel through the system which you're supposed to utilize to
Right.
have such
Right,
an
right.
opinion for it to
And-
consider it legitimate.
So, I guess what we're describing here with the Society of the Guild, the polymorphic machine, and all that, is really a whole system change, a system state change, a system type change into
Metaphor?
into
Sorry.
a new way of
Interjecting with a
of,
metaphor,
the-
leveling the playing field.
Sure.
Not in the revolutionary sense.
Right, but this comes with so much responsibility and so many details as we've described it, as we model
Right.
this polymorphic
It
machine.
has its own it has its own insane complexity, if you will.
Right. Yeah, so it's tough to say like, okay, just everybody's opinion should be listened to. Now, is that the literal opposite of this market machine structure that we're talking about? No, it doesn't mean that everybody's opinion is simply valid, but it means that everybody is having more of a responsibility within their own bubble, I guess, or sphere, to make sense of and to allocate trust to various things. You're not necessarily told who to trust. You have to decide that, and based on your own proficiency and different skills and all that, and understandings, we always society we always have to delegate out. So this is a big shift, change, a structural change that I guess to me it looks like it's emergent, and it's kind of coming back to some things that we've lost in the very beginning with the axial war, however you want to state it, the breakaway civilization, and all these plateaus built upon the market machine. We've lost something, and we're kind of coming back to that.
I'm gonna just give props to Zumi on isolating this particular problem in the way he articulated it. It's the externalization of memory. So, why that is a very important key element in our thinking is that this externalization process created a very complex and unforeseen consequence.
Interpretation.
It's very specific, the way I want to say it. So, before the advent of being able to write things down precisely, if you will, before the advent of, say, mathematics, or the ability to count and to say this is that, this is the other, this is creating definitions, before that point, we spoke, if you will, metaphorically, to the environment, and it responded to us in the immediate sense, right? And so our vision of the environment was immediate, and we sort of were the conductors of what the conversation was. What I mean by that is that as we had lived, we had projected our actions onto the environment, got a response back, and grew from the action, and consequently interacted in a mutual sense.
So you're saying there wasn't so much of an abstraction layer in between that relationship between ourselves and the environment.
Precisely, but as soon as we were able to articulate things in a precise way, aka using numbers, what happened was that we created a lot of artifacts out in the world that started to speak back to us. And this is where I want to give Zumi the credit, in that he saw this relationship very, very clearly when he articulated it, in that the externalization of what we remember became not a part of us, but became something that is outside of us, and now we are being told by the environment what we remember, what we should think, what we should interpret this to say, and so on and so forth. And so it became a very foreign affair, in that you brought nothing of yourself into it anymore, apart from being a legitimate orchestrator of putting these things in writing, which became a scarce, artificially scarce channel, because people would have to learn to write, would have to integrate that, and which would take a lot of indoctrination.
Acquire paper.
Right, it's an indoctrination process. So by the time you're capable of writing, you are also indoctrinated as to what you will be able to write, by the language, by the tradition of the writing itself, by many elements
This is
that are not necessarily obvious.
There's a complete split from the oral tradition in which you had another human talking to you rather than a piece of paper.
Right. So now inanimate objects which do not grow, which do not understand context, begin to speak to you. So remove a few generations from the time something was written to the time something is read, the context in which it is read will be different, but the meaning will be lost, and the new meaning that is understood could potentially be dismissed. But if it doesn't, it could start muddying up the waters in the next layer of thinking, because you can't necessarily dismiss, even to this day we can't dismiss old mythologies on the grounds of pure logic, based on the fact that a lot of it is subjective, right? So
it seems like this move would mark, or this would mark a move from hyperstition to superstition.
Precisely.
You start doing things just because it said so.
Whereas the hyperstitious hunter imbues itself with the quote-unquote hunting spirit. He changes himself to be more in tune with the process of the hunt. So in that sense, the hunter changes himself, not the reality of himself. The two are actually indistinguishable from his perspective, or her, whatever. Whereas the opposite is happening now, in that the superstitious element is to say, oh, you're just talking to some external abstract entity, trying to talk it into giving you favor, into that sort of thing, and thus it becomes a transactional interaction, which is obviously superstitious in its from beginning to end, and we can almost intuit its superstition in there, where we're thinking, look, well, wait a minute, none of this connects. right? Like it's all just words being thrown together into a soup, and somebody just happens to take that as somehow completely concrete.
Like you go to the store, give money, and you buy bread. You know that you're told that happens. You believe it happens. It does happen, and that's what reality
And the
is.
and the superstition is maintained despite the fact that money and food have nothing in common.
Right. And meanwhile, disruptions can happen and this kind of stuff, and then before you know it, your reality is blown apart, and you're completely have no idea what to do about it.
Just to mention here, what I was talking about is the more obvious case, but what you're mentioning is probably the most subtle case of the same phenomenon. So by the time you get to a point where you're just paying money for bread, right? Like the belief system that it's relied upon is so fundamentally evolved of its own abstraction, like abstraction upon abstraction upon abstraction, to the point of where you don't even separate that from being and hence the spectacular mode, if you will, of looking at life rather than anything before it. The disconnect between the food just costing you money is probably the best case to say we are looking at a representational reality in completely where a monetary sum equals
Right.
some kind of nutritional
And that's all
value.
there is to it. If your machine needs an input, such as bread, you go to this machine and you input a money which that machine needs, and you get this, and this transaction happens. But yeah, that's very complicated what that's all based off. We have so many plateaus coming up to this point where we can just say, oh, this $5 bill is the bread. It's the same damn thing. You just go and do it, and then it is that.
Yeah, like to get the unreality portion of it to feel and be real is perhaps civilization's greatest project, if to put a mirage.
You mean the breakaway civilization's greatest project?
All civilizations are breakaway. That's
Sure.
kind of a defining feature of a civilization, is it's breaking away from nature. It's in civilization where you get ideas like, well, maybe nature wasn't right about things. So I hear people argue like this all the time with religious thoughts. They were like talking about, we were talking about like that societies without leadership in general tend to be egalitarian and mutual, and without they don't subdivide very clearly amongst leadership versus subordination or any of that stuff. It switches all the time, right? And so we're not saying that those things don't exist in those societies. It's just that it's not as it's not a rank. It's not a title you get as much as it is, this is your job now versus this is your job later. And of course, there's variation on the solidarity of it all between societies. I think all I'm really getting at here is that the civilized breakaway sort of tends to reinterpret everything to the point of laundering all meaning out of it. And so by that point where meaning has been laundered, it is very easy to build up artificial meaning, hence superstition, on top of no meaning whatsoever. And we see this effect with the Greeks first, in terms of historicity, where they've basically started the argument of atheism from and broke away from their general understanding of gods and spirits and whatnot. So
just I just wanted to kind of clarify this, I guess, thought that I was having about saying, okay, there's civilization and then there's breakaway civilization as two things, because this is a pragmatic thing in the traditional sense that You don't want to say, oh, down with civilization to basically anybody, because that's not going to help anything, and everybody's going to take it as a threat. So therefore, to identify two different types of civilization, is if there's a good one, and then there's the breakaway one, which is not looped back into the interests of the individual. It's breakaway in that it does not care about you as a participant.
Yeah, I think the problem I have with the wording is not about the factualities of it. It's just the way it resonates. When you start to talk about when people generally rail on civilization,
Yep.
the alternative that's imagined alongside it is the complete anarchic chaos.
Right. That's why I don't want to trigger that.
Not just anarchy, which is arguably our most effective way of self-governing, but anarchy in a context of artificial scarcity, which we have also built up since the dawn of time. Because we have the artificial scarcity, trying the anarchic route is inadvertently going to lead to a power dynamic problem, in which people will systemically try the ego trip to position themselves over the scarcity of the artificial scarcity of the resources that are still existent, and a problem that is not yet solved.
Yeah, so then this is the whole transition idea, if you will.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, and as a generic word,
Yep.
That
That's the idea behind it.
We're utilizing what we have to move and transform and emerge something different. Yeah. Right.
And it's also pointing out that we're, as far as our rhetoric is going, our ideology isn't leading towards down with the system sort of scenario. It can't, especially because of the problems we're mentioning with that idea.
Yeah.
We already have a particular plateau on which we are.
The current the market machine is
Dark Knight of the Soul is also part of this.
the market machine is held up by a mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
So you can't just destroy it or parts of it. It has to be something has to change from within.
It has to be it has to be an like a, what do you call it? It's like a it's the situation of having a metastability. It is currently metastable, but one little trip is going to have a fire-like effect to
transition from that
catalyst-like
that
effect.
narrow metastability to a highly potential metastability.
Exactly.
And that's different type. That's what we are juxtaposing here with the market machine and the polymorphic machine.
Right. So in our description here, the polymorphic machine would actually be utilizing the existent market machine. However, it's the way it treats its internal authoritative structure is what it becomes different. This picture disappears from inside of it.
This picture.
Yes. This is what evaporates from the
and well, not just all at once everything, but little bits and pieces here and there to become stable and transition and stabilize.
This is where we get to the bottom up element of mediation, because it's that threshold of like, if there's enough bottom up happening, they will not allow the structure to materialize, and this is how it gets erased. So it doesn't get erased by somebody coming in and going, no, we can't do it.
Top down fiat. No.
Yeah, what we're undermining is its emergence
in our own little bubble,
right,
in which the bubble is expanding.
Right. That's the metastable concept of it. By the way, metastability and all that is borrowed from the cosmic landscape. So if there's a more intrigue into as to why it was used this way, that's the reference book to go to understand what Leonard Susskind is describing, a situation in which small algorithmic change perpetuates through the entire bubble of the universe at light speed, changing its fundamental physics laws. And so it's something you wouldn't even see coming, kind of thing, because of the light speed deal. But it's dealing with
There's
the
horizon.
it's dealing with all the fundamental constants that are supposedly are fixed in some sense in our observed universe, but we have no physics to say that they are fixed to begin with. And so current physics say that they are, as they oscillate in uncertainty, these constants could potentially shift to other different values, and which will rearrange the makeup of the physical universe. And so that kind of, so what it's saying is that our universe is a metastable construct, and at light speed it could rearrange itself into another construct of lower potential energy.
Right. And this is a fine metaphor for the horizon seen between layers of system. Anytime you're stacking in complexity, you can't say, oh, this is the next layer. Look, it's emerging right there. You can't speak of it within the language of the carrier of the current layer. You can't even understand that it's happening until it maybe boom materializes, and then suddenly this is no longer where things are being controlled, quote unquote.
Right. The next layer is the controller. But the control is facilitated by the arrangements and rearrangements of the previous layer to begin with. But those arrangements is what doesn't make any meaning, doesn't give any meaning to that layer. It's only at the higher level where we have arrangements. So, for instance, if I say a word just on its own without anything else, it could mean this,
Toilet.
that, or the other thing. Right, toilet. What am I talking about? Am I talking about going to the toilet? Am I talking about cleaning one? Am I talking about installing one? Am I talking about building one? Am I talking about how they work? Am I talking about the sewage system they're plugged into? So on and so forth.
So that's
and so
kind of a
forth.
higher layer of abstraction.
And all of a sudden you have a
in
sentence.
context.
I went to the toilet. Now you know what the hell happened.
Yeah, fine.
And all of a sudden all of these options are terminated, and you know what meaning has been given to the word by the sentence above it, sitting above it. So the word can never figure that out on its own. And you cannot look at a word and figure that out. But you can if you look at the sentence.
Right. Yeah. So
That's the idea.
So nobody needs to be seeing evidence or anything like that, or to say, oh, where is it? Where is the guild actually happening? And that's not really how it works. It works when there's enough of a base that's within the guild bubble, so to speak, and that things just spontaneously emerge at a higher layer, which
As a consequence, yeah.
which we can experience, but you can't show somebody else that experience if they haven't seen that happen.
You can only project those words for them to piece together into that sentence for themselves, if their makeup allows for that grammar.
Which it may likely not.
Right. This is where we hit the entropy theme and absurdity and everything.
We're
else.
going to get a lot into the basics and into, okay, where do you even begin with focus, right? We're gonna be getting into that. I just want to, I guess, iterate on that context here, that this doesn't depend on anything like it's basically just people acting in faith and knowing what's more kind of true to themselves and behaving as they know themselves to be, rather than just a piece of this market machine. Like, I am not a robot. People say that to themselves, and then they become a living being and they interact more wholly, right, with higher potential.
I apologize for the interruption. Just want to close that off with, oftentimes when people hear, shit, I lost my train of thought.
It's tough, I know. Waiting to say something, waiting to speak. I'm there with you, man. I feel your pain.
It's kind of important. It's like an important nitpick kind of a thing, because there's a few shifting mindsets that can happen here because of that description. Can you sort of reiterate what you were saying?
We're gonna start with focus. But this is a bigger picture of emergence, and it's on the faith of the individual and what they've seen and what they know to speak and act their own truth, which is the guild, and that's what ends up rubbing off on other people, right? And
The genuinity of it coming from the inside. Yeah, that's instinctual. Okay,
right.
I can't remember what I was going to say based on that, but that's yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm just trying to paint a picture here of, well, what are we doing, like, and there's no it's not on our shoulders, on us to do anything like that. We're just enjoying and describing what we do.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
So the idea of focus, in a lot of cases, what people will tend to ask is focus on what? Focus on what? And we're trying to paint the picture that this is the incorrect assertion in interpreting what we're saying, because we are not we are not saying do it for the sake of doing this activity or that activity. We are saying that this activity is being done for the sake of itself. So you not only are doing it for your extracurricular project, but you're doing it for the project of projects, right? Like, how do you articulate what you're going to do based on what you're doing without any reference to what is being necessarily done? I mean, because the truth of the matter, if you will, lies in the fact that each successive moment of doing anything is just a successive moment of doing something, right? And so that reality is kind of fixed in a sense, and that fixation of reality is the actual backdrop, not the content of this activity, not
Right.
the content of that activity,
So the big
but
chart,
the fact of activity leading to activity,
Actually,
leading to activity.
the small diagram, as we've called it, just continually happening, the moment. So we modeled and described the moment of things happening.
Right.
And when you ask, what do I focus on, or focus on what, that you're trying to inject specifics in a thing
Right.
that applies to literally everything generically.
Yeah, and then at which point I come up with a very pissy off answer of you focus on focus itself, like the doing of the doing, without reference to other things that are being done for that. So sort of like to reinterpret those actions as these actions, reinterpret working on these actions as also these actions, reinterpreting that as those actions as these everything becomes the same template over and over and over. There's what do you call it? There's a means behind the madness in that line of thinking as to why you would want to do that,
Right.
which is our main
And
attempt at trying to say why that's the case.
I just want to give a little bit of credit to basically every single spiritual system out there. They all at their core, most of them, seem to have some way or another of getting you into this core meditation. If you look at the core material or properly
I
guided.
feel that is a consequence of responding to the system throughout the ages, utilizing
Right.
whatever mechanism you have
Right.
going at the time.
So this is nothing new what we're doing per se, but we feel that we are, I guess, uniquely situated to help kind of modernize some of these systems into more contemporary terms and understandings. And hey, we're live streaming it. The Buddha wasn't live streaming, not to make that comparison, but any other
Which you just did.
priest or whatever, they didn't have access to this. They didn't know our lingo. They don't know how we talk about computers and networking and all this kind of stuff. All these metaphors that people now understand that we can inject into this discussion and kind of bring it forward.
And also, at least I personally have noticed that most of the old metaphors that come from the old systems do not speak to the modern, so to speak, sensibility.
And the plateaus upon which we stand.
Especially if you consider that business is atheistic in its format. It has no concept of a world outside itself. It's just a numerical world, right? So within that context, talking about God, talking about spirits, talking about self, talking about egos, talking about souls, talking about spirits. Did I mention spirits already?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Like, those words are non-words. They don't mean fuck all to any business process whatsoever, and consequently to the minds of the business individual, a business-oriented individual.
Mm-hmm.
They might take those words as a novelty of an abstraction of something to be out there, but not as a part of their experience.
Yep.
So soul, talking about souls, talking about saving spirits, talking about repentance, talking about any of the old ways, old school ways of meaning, doesn't actually evoke meaningful responses from anybody anymore. And this is
Mm-hmm.
the entire point of creating a language to do exactly that. By taking the same words that they use initially and present a model that, in which they flow together, they're re-demonstrating again the interrelationship of what they are putting into their thought process and getting back out of it by the externalization internalization process, upload download, which has been so fully hijacked that it's unrecognizable as a living thing anymore.
Not only hijacked, but protected and defended against intrusions
I think that goes with the hijacking.
by the polymorphic machine. Yeah, hijacking has its own immunity, right? Its own little, keep
It's a parasitic.
keep the enemies out. We're
it
gonna
looks like
make money.
To us, modeling wise, it looks like a parasite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
That's the metaphor I would go with. This is spectacular simulation. All of those things. They're the symptoms of that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Oh! Ha! Ha ha ha! Yeah, right. Well, on that note, we'll be right back. We are back. We are back. Apologies for interruption. And
I'm stuck on Facebook. 1 second.
so wherever we were with the discussion, we're just trying to give a big picture context, I guess. But we do want to move. We want to move in towards things that you, our dear listener, our dear friends and peers, can meditate on.
Something concrete.
Right.
For once.
Concrete things. Or we'll do our best to get there. But
I'm not the best. I'm definitely not the best for that, but as we all probably have gained insight into.
Yeah, so that's why sometimes, I lead a little bit and end up speaking, I guess, more to the audience who can, in words that can be understood, which is great. It's great
What are you implying?
to pepper that in there every once in a while. So let's move on from this chart, the alpha beta stuff. We did that last time. This is the dysmorphic market machine. This is how the machine stacks. It stacks everywhere. There's stacks all over, stacks upon stacks. And just like fingers and branches and trees of stacks and like everything stacking all over.
You know what? Stacking in itself isn't wrong. If you imagine like the stacking, like fill out a fractal kind of picture. The way to see this kind of stacking is that it doesn't evolve into its own niches that it creates. What it does is that it has this very rough shape to it, which crushes and jams into itself until the weaker branches break, and it's basically self-destructive as it's growing. It's like a crystal growing into itself and pushes itself apart.
And we've brought up the cancer analogy before, and basically when you have units at each level making up these layers, when they're not able to look into their own context and act as the whole from within themselves, the whole system is disconnected from the whole, and therefore it's something that sees itself separate from nature, from the whole, and does this kind of like ice just colliding and kind of. It's
a good point you're making. Disconnected from the whole, disconnected from nature being the same thing.
Right.
That's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about nature, I think I've always looked at it more as like an abstract object. But what you're saying here makes is the better picture to utilize there. Disconnecting from the model is the disconnection from the nature of what we're talking about. So model nature are synonymous in a sense.
Right, and there is an inner nature that we can detect also, which is kind of like we feel like is our self and our feelings and that kind of stuff that can be misunderstood by the outside. We are reconnecting with that as well. This is the mind-body disconnect, which is what kicked off civilization in its current form, can be recuperated, or not recuperated, it's the wrong word, regenerated, I guess, the connection between, so that the mind focuses through the body onto everything else.
Right. The metaphor here is being the process of healing, actually. We're looking at what traditionally the situation, like if say you're looking at the Buddhist perspective, just as is, what the Buddha is saying about the human condition, especially specifically the civil human condition, is that it is a disease in need of healing. Not a terminal disease, mind you, but one of affliction, in that there is still the very full potential of the real human experience throughout. However, it's being neglected, if you will, in favor of treating disease symptoms constantly and avoided otherwise.
That's how the market machine works, and we end up feeling crushed. We don't know how to describe what's crushing us, but it's this cold interaction between ourself and even the mind and ourself, but ourself and the society, where things are very rigid, I guess. There's not a living. It's not a living process.
To give
What's
you a
going on?
clear example of this rigidity, our access to our society is on paper. You have to fill out this form. You have to fill out that form.
Right.
This is our entire access to society.
Yeah.
And of course, it's going to look very rigid because we're looking at very specific, rigid little tokens to pass around.
And it feels alienating. And of course,
Why is that? Because this is an alienating activity.
so at this plateau, as we've described probably many times through this series, we are at such a plateau of commodification that is through all these plateaus, that even our very ability to make sense of reality has also been offloaded onto to the social society, and we are
What you spend your time on thinking. I would put it that way. So
but
you're,
is this not the virtual reality?
time. What is it?
Temporal tampering.
Temporal
But there's
tampering.
another one.
Because look at how just Facebook as an example. Facebook is the thing that controls what is the next post. What is the next post? So it exposes you to this thought, that thought, this thought,
Right.
this thought. So it's trying. Like, I'm not saying it's doing it 100%, given the fact that we are still human, but what it's trying to manage is what you will spend your energy on thinking. Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? Is it going to be this? And then it has
Right.
algorithms to promote certain lines of thinking versus others, right? Like we all know that this part of it is the social experiment of Facebook altogether.
Of course, yeah. Your manager will tell you do this project, then this project. So you're
That's more
in
explicit, but yeah.
work time, yes. But yeah, so a social plateau we would expect this to happen everywhere, where all your time is managed. You get home right on the computer. You pop up. Okay, I've got this news feed, that news feed, that news feed, and you just start consuming news
If you
feeds.
go home after work and you just sit there lazily watching TV, your time is managed to do not interfere with the system. Here, pacify yourself with its consumption. Right. There's like two sides to it: the passivity and the activity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that was a useful comment, but sorry.
Yeah, no, that's just elaborating, which is fine. So we find our time is consumed for us. Basically, we hook into these various things which give us streams of things to look at or think about or do,
And prompt you into action here and there,
and so
or get banned.
temporal tampering, is that associated with the corporate state?
Temporal tampering. It's
Do we have- can we
associated
pull it up?
with virtual state. Wait, no. Temporal tampering creates so corporate state creates the technology for temporal tampering, which becomes a plateau over time. So as the corporate state is established fully, right? Its next project of creating work for the sake of work, right, is the management of what people think about. So on top of the corporation, you now have the social network. Right? You don't have if you notice, you don't have social networks that do not belong to corporations.
Of course.
So the previous plateau obviously isn't disappearing anywhere. It's just that there's even more abstractions going on top of it. And so
Tunneled reality. That was the last one.
Yeah, tunneled reality is the full net effect of temporal tampering. So if the temporal tampering is complete, aka your thought process is managed by whatever feed externally comes to you, and you're just reactive in that,
Mm-hmm.
you're in a tunnel of that feed.
Right.
And
And
this is
as
what,
we were saying, this is the capstone, I guess,
And if you
to
want-
the process of
and if you
qualification.
want more evidence that this is happening even between individuals like you, myself, and I, who are capable of even talking about
Myself and I. Are you going schizo on me?
I'm going. I had less than 6 hours of sleep.
Right. The attack from last night.
Yeah, the whole raccoon thing did happen.
So yourself and I.
I'm very much medicated from the ordeal.
It's good.
Yeah, so even between you and I, right, we are prone to our own reality tunnels because of this. Our discussion on vaccines is a great example on it, because we are working from our own managed information pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
We manage it on our own, but we get it from the same shitty sources, right? But
Yep.
because of the being forced into management of that information rather than our information in general, like we don't have.
We don't have the data. We don't do
Right.
experiments. We don't.
Because
do
of
this or
that, we are stuck. Even being in as much as agreement as we are, right? We can work out a completely different reality tunnel for ourselves as a consequence, which points out an interesting discrepancy in the fact that what we're presenting here and how we actually are, in that we don't share that common DNA enough to resolve the problem. Part of it is the lack of actual functional information. Well, actually, that's the main component of that.
I think so. Yeah.
And you can already tell that this is a kind of interference play by the system in trying to arrange an artifact such as this that tries to illuminate this problem to begin with. It's even the people involved in this discussion are stuck in their reality tunnels. So this is kind of
What you'd expect.
difficult.
Yep. It's what you would expect. So I want to try move forward. We've been giving context and all this kind of stuff, and interesting discussion about the market machine and how it's all working. We want to move towards the Society of the Guild, the polymorphic machine, and we want to start with some basics, right? So we want to go back to, okay, how do you first encounter the polymorphic machine in this society? So what would it look like? How would it come to you or approach it? How would you become aware of it, right? So, and the awareness is that people are expressing the guild in a way that others can see. So we leave artifact wakes in everything we do. People can see what we're doing, and they see, there's something different going on here, which is different from
An interest
the
peaks.
market machine.
The interest is peaked, and it's often due to intuition, not a logical sort of
Right.
assertion.
And that's a great point, because there's nothing logically that we can do to prove that awareness should be had of the guild. There's no
Right,
formula.
because it doesn't actually pertain to any of the algorithms about which it would then continue to speak of.
Right. So without, I guess, getting too much into it again, just rambling and discussing context and building context, maybe we can just jump right into focus.
Mm-hmm.
And
So I would use the backdrop diagram for the focus, so that we at least have the circles.
this one?
Yeah. Simply so that we have like a kind of a structure to look upon as a reference, as we're talking.
Now we do have...
So-
okay.
And in one sense, this is what we're trying to achieve. That this is a structure, a social structure, if you will, that we're
Right. Okay.
Speaking from.
So big picture. Let's just say each dot here is a neural unit. Let's
call it a person.
We have loop back.
Let's call that a person. It's the simplest neural unit way of identifying something.
So these are people. They are peopling, and what we are showing here is that there are different interactions based on different contexts. The different contexts are different guilds, basically different proximity guilds, which are serving different functions to cause things to happen economically through society and to get things done.
As a whole.
Yeah, which isn't depicted here. This is just...
No, it is, because the whole square of it happens to be the full square of the proximal column. So in the circle and back, it does.
But I mean, this isn't a real-time data and representation of actual guilds.
No, this is why they're left to proximal guilds. Natural guilds is a stable column; it doesn't change. Proximity guilds is what changes all the time, right?
Okay, so proximity guilds here being what's looped up.
Yeah.
So many
the dots themselves as well, but that's it's another detail that can be not necessarily important right now.
They're within the circle.
Right. You all I'm saying there is that you can imagine each dot as being its own blown up circle as well. So there's a kind of a recursion in this scene.
This image, we would expect to see some type of image looks like this in a market machine context as well.
Which is why it would still pass that litmus test.
So, sure, in a market we have different networks trading, negotiating, whatever, and connecting and linking through each other. One not necessarily having direct contact with another, but through the network you can contact and make society happen.
Point to be made about that is that blending with the market machine is what creates the corporate shell around the guild. Right? The ability to blend with the market protocols and present itself as another market unit is what allows it to build its own shell around itself as an organism in an environment.
So you're talking about how we've identified that if you want to build the guild, so to speak, it must be protected in a shell that looks like corporation that society's used to. Yeah. If you don't have that, it doesn't know what you are, right? You just look like wandering, aimless, nothing doing nothing.
Right, which is a great way to get reclassified as an undesirable of the society structure.
So a non-person, an omega, etc.
Criminal, extremist,
right,
etc.
Right. So anything that this system does when it organizes people together is going to have that shell that looks like a corporation.
It
basically.
Has to,
It must.
Because this is the only person that the legal system understands.
Right.
The only person the legal system understands is the person on paper, which is the corporation, which is very evident in the way legislation is articulated in general.
Oh, somebody posted the coon. Traveling again.
Is that
Skew? Hey, buddy. Well, he's not listening. He's traveling again, but he is offering sympathies in the form of a coon comic.
I am the coon right now.
You are the
bitten
coon.
by the radioactive coon.
So what this image is also depicting here is you can see.
I don't smell like shit.
Kill it.
Hey, it's nature.
Kill it with fire.
Because
so something to notice here within each proximity guild, we have this kind of weird stack. It looks like a couple buildings, a few buildings together. This is representing basically the guild, I guess, itself. We have the fundamental, the natural and proximal guilds, and that is what is allowing.
Fundamental mediation and network.
That would be the fundamental guilds.
Sorry. Oh, no, you're right. You're right. You're right.
The fundamental guilds themselves, which is a recursive fractal of the thing itself.
Yep.
Into fundamental, which we can see a 3 stacks in that far left stack. There's 3 stacks. That's again the recursive.
Yeah. If you look at the right side of the diagram, you see the columns isolated, and and then we have these lines projected from it, the dashed lines.
Right.
What it's saying is that the entire proximal box looks like what the guild circles and the proximal guilds are. So inside that box is that's what it contains. So if we were to look at that picture internally and see all those 3 boxes represented internally,
that's you and all your friends and your family and your different and your coworkers and all your different relationship bubbles.
So each one of these cases of these 3 columns in each one of these circles represents its vision of the whole. So in each person, each guild in this has also a vision of all the other guilds to some extent, and it doesn't necessarily have to match, but the overall picture will at least coalesce all of it together into one giant whole.
So each dot here representing a person, let's say, is having within their head a map that looks something like this, in which they know that there are people doing different things, and they can tap into
different groups.
Tap into those guilds for different economic functions to happen, which constitute the polymorphic machine.
So what we're doing here is that we're pretending that the leftmost column in every single case inside the square contains the whole square. Is that a good way to say it?
The leftmost column? Like
the leftmost column, the rightmost column. Sorry, that's my bad. The rightmost column, the one that is turned proximal on the right-hand side of the full diagram, when it's seen inside each one of these circles, will actually contain the full square with potentially different resolution.
Right.
Maybe with mistakes, even.
And especially, a person would know what groups they're part of, and people that are in a part of a group, but they may not know how the group works exactly. In other words, the genes that make that group together.
Oh, okay. So we have this represented explicitly. If you look at, say, the top leftish side, it's not exactly all the way to the left, but you see 1 dot inside 2 circles, right? Inside of a 3-dot circle and inside of a 2-dot circle, crisscrossing. And that dot has access to 2 versions, if you will, of the 3-column structure.
Right.
So in one context, that 3-column structure has this picture, and another perhaps a slightly less articulated picture. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all up for the situation and context.
So these are like different machines. These are 2 different machines that this person is a part of.
Right. And the key is that even though those machines are 2 different ones, they're consisting of the same construct. Like, this is why I like the DNA analogy so much, is in that part does not change, and so all the contribution to either machine will somehow will flow based on the same, if you will, code of protocols and understandings and compositions and articulations and so on and so forth.
Right. And this includes also we can throw in a complicating factor of coherence, different degrees of coherence. So some of these dots may be highly coherent with one group and merely participating in another group. Right. So they don't really know how to master that group and how to share it with others, but they know how to participate. They know generally what you give and what you get from it.
Right. So sometimes you articulate it as input and output. Sometimes you're on the receiving end of something. Sometimes you're on the giving end of something, right? And so based on the nature of that relationship, you may need more coherence on this side, but not that side, or vice versa.
Exactly. Like often in a demand and supply setting. If you're demanding something, you know what you need, you demand it. But the corporation that's going to come together and supply that can be very complicated. You don't need to know what it did to give you that thing, but you know that you need something that looks like this, right?
Right.
So to interact with this, you don't have to be some high level guru.
So here we're actually
Master.
articulating a kind of interconnection between what the current market machine is, the way it works, versus how the guild is going to work, and it's still there is a
how it
kind
does work.
and there is still a kind of a connection in between the two, in that there's still a systemic way to meet the demand, for example, and all of that. And there's still a kind of a distinction between what is who is demanding, what is supplying, for example. Like there's still a disconnect in that. And this is a consequence of living on the plateau end of things rather than pre-plateau end of things. So obviously there's going to be an artificiality injected into it to some degree.
And the word transition is a great word once again, because when you put a demand out there, if the guild can't supply it, well, the market maybe can. And this is a,
And this
you try to move towards the guild supplying everything, but
interestingly enough, because of that, if you go up the natural stack, eventually you'll hit a guild called trade. Trade is sitting there simply to cover that base of where the guild is sitting inside of an environment that can supply it, but is not it. Right? It has to go. It has to go external to itself, like an other algorithm has to go and get food or something to that effect.
And which is a situation.
And this is the trade guild
that will always exist, or we expect to exist.
So, the only other thing I really want to highlight there is that the trade guild is not an internal element. You don't. Trade is not technically necessary within the confines, because the demand and supply mechanism needs to cover those bases. It's when the demand and supply mechanism is incapable of supplying it internally that it has to reach out, do the trade thing, so that it could still shelter and protect and still do without trade internally.
Mm-hmm.
Trade is a means for the guild to reach outside of itself to meet some kind of demand or some kind of supply which is in demand.
Right. So like the body has fat stored, but if it can get food through the mouth into the digestive, then it doesn't need to eat its own fat.
Yeah, sure.
So like as
it works on
biological
it works on
there.
many levels. Yeah. I think the main conceptual difference that is very, very important is that we used to think we are looking at trade in general as a means of quote-unquote progress. The guild presents trade as a means of dealing with the enemy, if you will, or the non-itself, the other.
Right.
So the guild looks at...
And the market machine is wholly based off of trade.
Right. Which means the market machine is wholly based on having everybody as enemies, and as a fundamental constituent of the system. The guild creates one single ginormous shield as quote unquote one of such enemies within that system, but internally it works to shield it from that system.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't shield it, it's not working. That's the other component to it, if you will.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So this diagram here, I guess, is just to give kind of like to be able to speak to the structure that we're expecting and seeing at a kind of social level of interactions, and having modeling between, and having proximity guilds and different machines here enveloped within each circle, a different machine working together to do a thing, and trades and interactions happening between them.
Right, and the metaphor then becomes it's like organs within an organism.
Right. It's natural, man.
So this takes care of what we would call the assumed backdrop of what we really want to get at as to how to do that. And this is where the middle column is probably
Right.
going to start really playing a good role.
And yeah, so about the middle column there, we can see that each loop here is having a model that's being shared amongst them so that they can speak the same language and facilitate interactions. You have to speak the same language to put certain artifacts onto the carrier, which can be recognized by other individual persons to do an interaction.
Let's take this a step further and call the box itself, the 3-column box,
Yeah.
call it language. If you call that language, what you'll start
Sure.
to see is
That's
that
fine, yeah.
different dialects of this language are spread out throughout the guild structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could see that picture emerging if you look
Yeah.
at it as a language, like it's a dialect. Here you got techies, here you got jocks, here, you know what I mean.
Fine. And we see something recurring and in common among these dialects, in that they are divided up into three different pieces.
Right.
And this is the holonic structure, which we've been kind of
Yeah. So this
Which
is the
has been coming up again
this is
and
what we
again.
would call the constraint. Like you have to have that constraint to have these 3-column structures everywhere. Right.
Mhm.
That's your constraint. That you have to have these 3-column structures everywhere for everybody to be able to communicate via their dialects.
And it's very simple, really. It is what's happening, and all these kind of cliches and whatnot. But you are having groups of people interacting. That's a proximity. They're interacting with a model. That's your genes, so to speak, in the natural stack sense, where you're having protocols of how to interact. And then you are having a dynamic between the fact of these people in proximity and your objects in proximity, and the model which is being applied to them. There's a dynamic between those which causes the model to change and the proximity to change
All at once.
in
yeah.
relation to each other. That relation is the fundamental dynamic between the two, and it's happening everywhere. And when you have this kind of a model working, that's how you have protocols that can slide from one place over to another, and the protocols cause that pattern, that model, to move the proximity of many different places.
So one element I think that's very important here to articulate then is that the similarity of the dialect allows the circles to sort of intermingle, in the sense that you can start to switch around the terminology, the slight bits of language that's around one proximity to another. But because there is like a common core, you can actually articulate concerns from distinct circles to other distinct circles in such a way that allows them to interoperate rather than to
Yeah.
compete.
And it's-
Actually, competition could be a form of interoperation. However, unlike the market machine, which relies on said competition, in this case, we're talking about the survival of the fittest kind of competition, where we're not looking for
best
a
comes
profit. We're looking for something that can actually do the work and stick around.
Like if you present a protocol, hey, do it this way, and someone's like, oh, I tried that, and this actually works better. Then they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to advertise this anymore. I'm going to advertise what you just said,
Right.
because I've tried it and know, hey, that works.
Or the recognition that this works in that context and this works in that context, and therefore both are correct and still be utilized, and they're not in real competition. They're just
Sure, in different
in niches
spaces.
they are competition,
Yes.
but not in reality.
But we do end up having a stacking sort of more fundamental protocols and more, I guess, significant protocols, and the fundamentals being shared all around. Like, this is how a better way to do the guild, and how to introduce the guild, and how to do this and
as a
that.
guild, as a concept of guild in itself, not as necessarily to do this or that.
The sort of, I guess, when you say, okay, focus on what, that as being not the right question, what we're talking about here is how to interact with people in a proximity guild in such a way that you collect protocols, a model of what you're doing, in such a way that you can share that to other proximities and have a mimetic selection going on. And this is the polymorphic machine learning how to do things better as information flows.
Focus in this case meaning asserting the feedback of what has transpired and how it fed back into the cycle of the next moment.
Right.
It is not particular to
yes.
anything.
So
It's particular to itself.
So when you focus, you take, okay, you said do this protocol, I'll try it, and then see what happens. And okay, that was great. That was better than my protocol. Now this is my protocol.
Right.
Now that's
So
mine.
making the model about the protocols rather than about what the protocols are used for is the key.
Right. The fact of this dynamic happening in all and any facets of society, right? Which
Right.
of all the natural guilds, of all the archetypes.
And this is also why we're brought back to, it doesn't matter what it is we're focusing on, it's going to be about the fact of focus that you're focusing on.
Right. And so we could take it to this, back to the archetypes, primordial archetypes, and say, okay, this is what you're actually busy doing in this is your actual context here. Let's say corporate and
Most
state.
people behave in the corporate fashion.
Right. So you've got your operations, human
The
resources, project management.
I would call it this.
To make an organizational structure happen, you need all these facets, right?
Can I give a sort of
Give
like
it
a
away.
painting
Give
of
away,
this
man.
of this image? The personal stack here is what we would probably refer to as the existential angst. How it's fabricated out of the current market system, because of the personal stack being a bunch of answers to existential concerns to begin with, like what is
Right.
who am I, identity, why am I here, purpose, like all of these kinds of questions, they start to come up when you look at this archetype stack, and those are the questions that are considered in the Western world to be like the primordial set of questions. Who am
Right.
I, why am I here, where am I going, and blah 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 blah. So this is stack is essentially is an emergence of the absurdity of, you know, of uncertainty, of entropy, of space-time behaving the way it does, applied to a full-blown organism that is self-aware and is making those distinctions of like, who am I, why am I here,
And
trying
operating
to actually answer those questions.
operating within a full state.
Right, where
within
it's
this is my world, this is who I am, this is what I do.
where it's
This
already
whole-
a given, you're born into it.
This
yeah.
mind apprehension of what is happening.
So on the flip side of the existential angst, you have the response to it as to like, how do I perpetuate my nihilism through eternity, right? So this is your eternalism and nihilism dichotomy. How do you maintain the system in indefinite perpetual motion, right? Which is
Yep. The fear of death.
perpetual motion. The concept, if you look at it, comes from the existential angst perception, in that things end,
Right.
things cease to exist, right? Like the idea of existence and non-existence is playing a huge role in it. And so because of the play of existence and non-existence in the thinking, in the narratives, you have a situation where, oh shit, I will cease to exist, and oh shit, what do I do for eternity? Like, what do I do with my existence that I've never experienced the end of my existence? Therefore, how do I perpetuate it further, forever? It's a very rough depiction. I don't want to be quoted on it necessarily as is.
Right.
We could dig into the subject matter itself.
I just
later.
wanted to get into that because we are modeling something here, and what we're modeling is organizational structures, and those archetypes that we just had pulled up, that's what's being built here, and this is showing that people coming together to share a model
Right.
to build that, to emerge it.
Right. So I would say the question is that how do you take this big square, of which everybody else has a version of, and put a shield around it such that it's recognized by the current market system without interjection into breaking it all up,
Right.
and decimating what this is.
Right.
So if you will, the corporate shell is around this square.
Yeah. Yep. I think we should take a break for now. And we will be right back, of course. Back into it, because the needs of the few outweigh the needs of you. That's the slogan of the
I'm totally thieving that.
slogan of the market machine. Yeah, that's the way it is. That's just the way it is. So,
There's also another good quote I really like here.
oh yeah,
Why do bad things happen? Because market. Now go die.
because of the market.
Now go die.
Fine. Fine. Yeah. So I was,
Those are the only two answers it can answer.
I was gonna say, like, there's probably all kinds of tropes and all that of protecting the guild within a corporate shell, such as things that look like traditionally shitty situations or whatever, like communes or whatever, that aren't that are actually just exploiting within, and it's not really the guild inside, but it's it purports to be. We're all just happy harmony.
Yeah, we definitely realize about what thin line this is straddling.
Right. It's almost impossible to get it right.
Right. I'm reminded of infiltrations of different compounds and things like that. The particular story that stands out in my head is the
immunity.
Is the decision to burn a house full of children in an effort to save them from their circumstances.
Right.
And so the system winded up killing them to save them from themselves, which is brilliant.
It's like Waco shit, or yeah.
So this would be like an example of a shell that certainly did not work, and certainly did not achieve a kind of coherence that we are attempting to discuss.
No. And I don't know too much about that, but yeah.
Well, what we can say for sure is that the model of a common DNA, such as this, even if a superficial attempt was made to create something like that, it would have never been able to to capture this whole point, and its inability to do so is what's reflected in its demise.
Sure.
Because the corporate shell, for all intents and purposes, cannot actually be distinguishable. If when,
Right.
when we're talking about this, like in its full blown implementation, like it cannot not. It's a requirement of the corporate shell not to be distinguishable from any other entity, to the point that
Right.
it literally shields guild activity properly, and appropriately. And so there is no legal question.
And
There's no-
basically
there's no-
survives on its own as a corporation.
There's no question of extrinsic entities trying to decimate it from the inside out for the purposes of.
But which you will and do have happen all the time. Infiltration, and
if the
espionage,
internals
sabotage.
Yes, but if the internals work also correctly, right? Like this has to be a full package.
Right.
I was talking about the external, but if the internal is also working correctly, then positions are ephemeral. Because of its
Right.
ephemerality, there is no authority in the traditional sense. There is authority in context only, so on and so forth. And so, what the shell is actually protecting is the ability of these bubbles, these circles around the proximity guilds, to shift at will based on context. That's its job, is to protect the ability of these circles to shift and reassert themselves in different ways as time moves. So, an appropriate implementation will not allow to that kind of authority to ever bubble up into its ranks. It would simply it would be drowned out by its incoherence. It's a self-destruct property in that case.
Well,
Again, implementation has to be perfect for it to happen. That's the hyperstitional position.
implementation is never perfect because of coherence. You always have participants. You always have membership.
So when
mastery.
when I'm talking about that, I'm saying there's the archetype upon which a model is built, and the guild is going to be the variances on that theme. It will. So there's obviously going to be a variance, but it's the same kind of variance that we see in the species. Sure, you and I have somewhat different properties, but we still have generic properties that assert us as human. Hence, archetype human. So, in the same sense, archetype guild. And nobody's going to be the perfect guild. They're going to be a variation of the archetype of the guild.
And guild is something that we can say, this is focus is happening. Focus is here because we have the membership, we have the fundamental, which is navigating the difference between the model and the proximity. Whenever like both go along, whenever something is learned, it goes into the model. Whenever something is in the model, it becomes tested, and then it becomes verified or not verified that it wasn't good, and then you retry. So if you're on the living edge of life, in that you're paying attention and focus, and you have feedback going on, then you have the guild happening, right?
Right. So like it's kind of like by definition, if you will.
So this is the part where we eat burritos.
Num num num.
So if you're not into that, you can skip ahead. If you're watching live, then too bad. So we're going to try and move towards focus as a kind of a topic, and as a starting point for the basics. So in any guild, this is the membrane. You're encountering the guild. Okay, I'm aware that something cool is happening. I would like to participate so that to go to the next level, kind of thing. And basically we start with focus, we have to point the individual, the person, at themselves and say, okay, see this happening in you. Do focus.
Mhm.
Hygiene, rest, nutrition, fitness, in whatever order.
That wasn't the order.
And extend that into the kind of the holonic model and out into the guild itself, how the guild functions. So you will see an isomorphism between that little piece of focus and the guild in the greater picture, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way of looking at it. I also there's also kind of a meditative approach to perceiving it. It's the same thing. It's not in any different sense. The focus is still categorized as the hygiene, nutrition, rest, fitness, fourfold
Mm-hmm.
activity. But the what I wanted to sort of get into is that there's a now that we've given a lot of background and backdrop for how the guild is shaped with the dots and circles and the columns and whatever. So what constitutes a commonality in those boxes that makes these this picture so quote unquote coherent, as we say?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the topic of focus that we want to get into, and where the similarity of like from the internal what we call neural unit, but it's a person, it's a group, it's whatever.
Right.
How is it? What is it specifically, concretely, they bring into the picture that others also bring into the picture,
Right.
such that they can quote unquote understand each other's
And again,
very similar dialect.
this is such a generic thing that it's not what are you focusing on. It's first, in a way, yes, you are focusing on something, but really you're focusing on focus. You're focusing on what is this core kernel
Mhm.
that is archetypal to the entire system.
Right. So it's not. So the what is it that you're focusing on winds up being answered by the really unsatisfactory answer of you're focusing on focus itself.
Right.
And because of that focus on focus, everybody's let's assume everybody in the guild is focusing on focus. That's the common language everybody shares. Now that we have established the commonality of that language, we can start to articulate what we would call a dialect of that language. And so what does that look like to focus here versus there versus
Mhm.
here versus there? Because contextually speaking, every person is different in a different place, in a different time, in a different context. So
Right.
what does a unifying quote unquote focus even means in that situation? So that's where we pick up the slack, if you will.
Yeah.
In saying that focus, in particular, is it's disconnected from all other concepts. It's an overlay concept that applies to all others. So for the first, we remove ourselves from whatever the hell it is we're algorithming and whatnot. We're putting inside of it a system where we not only do the algorithm but check it, and check it again, and check it again, and check it again.
Sort of a
deliberately.
meta level
Mhm.
to it.
Mhm. So, one way to understand focus is doing this step behind the scenes of meta, of looking at what you're doing and reasserting it every time it's done. But while that's still abstract, let's get to an actual concrete thing that somebody can actually do. And one of the first feedbacks is an external realization that there is excess material surrounding your body and environment,
Right.
right? And so this is where we come to the first point of focus we call hygiene, which it constitutes of the removal of what you would call gunk or excess or anything else to that effect, as a metaphorical statement. How do you apply that? Well, in the most concrete sense, as it is stated. For example, cleaning yourself, hygiene, just the removal of extrinsic foreign elements off of your body. You can articulate it internally in terms of cleaning out your mind, in terms of thought,
Right.
addressing a particular set of thoughts as, unfruitful, addressing another particular set of thoughts as fruitful, cleaning out house from unfruitful to fruitful. All of that is an activity that is constituting of cleaning house, cleaning self, cleaning
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
So for this basic introduction, we are looking at kind of showing an internal and an external job that has to be done relating to this focus on hygiene, on nutrition, on rest, on fitness. Just to give examples, as the external world, like your house, if it's cluttered and you can't find anything, how do you function?
Or move.
How do you move? You can be stuck,
I
literally.
Right. Like I come from the experience of having kids. They have no concept of non-clutter, and I trip over my entire house as a result.
Or
Right.
worse, in the hoarder's case, where it
Right.
is literally.
I'm just trying to give this small example, but the hoarder is like
There's a
classic.
there's a tiny path, and you can't find anything.
And if what happens when a match lights?
Well, there's all kinds of other
Right, like-
factors to that. Yeah.
Or feces, or from animals that
But
move in.
from the hygiene perspective, what we're trying to do is make our environment very clear as to the function of what it's doing. You should visually be able to see it clearly.
And now to point out the really concrete element of doing that is in that the question of focus on what, right, and why it's not the correct question. This is basically winds up being because what we're not trying to do is focus on any one particular thing, but what we're trying to do is say hygiene is an element of this activity, of that activity, of the follow. Every single activity you can possibly imagine involves the concept of hygiene. And so what we're saying that by focusing
Right.
on hygiene, we're not saying don't focus on here, but focus on that in relationship to the greater scheme of hygiene and from which, and I guess I should probably mention that the baseline for getting that feedback according to hygiene is realizing what you are as an organism in the environment and what hygiene demands from being an organism in the environment, right? It's like is the utility of what you are to inform what to do in the context of what else you want to do, right? So how is hygiene defined? Hygiene is defined by your existence, right? And how is hygiene applied? It's applied as a lens of all other activities.
Right. So these, we'll just pull that up again. But this is reflecting the holonic triad. This hygiene, nutrition, rest, fitness.
I only stopped at hygiene just to give an example of what it is to focus in a most basic sense.
Right. And so we are taking something very basic, of course, right, again, and extending it into something more complicated. But so we're talking about what do you encounter when you first encounter the guild? How do you get initiated into it? There has to be something that everybody knows, like, say, even body hygiene, right? Like, forget the environment. Like, brush your teeth or bad things happen. Like, wash yourself or bad things happen. Wipe your ass or bad things happen. Like, you'll get like a rash and like crusty shit down there, right? Like you just know what happens if you don't do hygiene, right? So
That's the beginning of the common language of what we call the guild, yeah.
right. So it doesn't matter how complex it is. If you're not initiated into the guild, this is where coming right back to this much of a basics, that the the archetypal functionality, the core functionality of the environment has to be apparent and visible, and all other things are gone. They must be removed, because through entropy always there's waste and garbage accumulating. But we want to see the archetype rising up through the environment, which is, say, our body. It has a a butthole which has to be very freaking clean, otherwise you get disease and rashes and all kinds of shit, right? That's just what it is. You want a nice
All
clean
kinds of, sorry?
rashes, disease. You want a nice clean butthole, right? So sorry to say, but that's we come back to that, right? Because
No, the butthole is the greatest example, because who in this planet thinks of a butthole and thinks, hey, wait a minute, that's the pinnacle of hygiene. No, it's the one place you have to look on your body most intently to see how unhygienic you can get.
Right. Yeah, so it doesn't matter what level of complexity in society we're talking about. If you're to be initiated into the guild, we have to take it back to such basics that we know everybody has to do with something with hygiene, with nutrition, right? And these terms are directly reflective of the holonic structure that we use to describe reality without losing potential.
Coherence. Coherence is what we're after, is coherence versus incoherence.
Right, of course. And what I mean by potential, though, is in a hierarchical type system, a market machine type
Right,
system,
the potential's removed.
you get, okay, wipe your butt. Did I wipe it? Yes. Do I have to check it? I wiped it. It doesn't matter. I wiped it. You did the action, right? That's the market machine
Tokens. Tokens.
telling you, okay, yes, I did wipe, whatever. But you don't look into it, because this whole other side is missing anyways. This is what
I think looking into people's buttholes is not a good idea of an elaboration, but okay.
It's so this is the great thing about this model is of this.
We can apply it to that too.
And the butthole itself is that yes, we can show how ridiculous it is that if you're like sitting there, crusty. You just gotta like sit there itching yourself, and you don't know why, but because you did wipe, but you didn't wipe properly, right? Maybe, right? So anyways, that's feedback. That feedback has to happen. If something is still wrong, then you have to look into it, and that's the difference between the polymorphic machine and the market machine. The market will take things, and I did this token, and okay. And
No. The difference is in that the polymorphic machine does not neglect this feedback, whereas the market machine would definitely neglect the feedback in an effort to accommodate it through another trinket, another token.
Oh, I was thinking that too. Yes, right. Like
there's a difference there. There's a token.
A special ointment you can get for an itchy ass.
Exactly. Instead of fixing the way
of wiping
you wipe
properly, you can be sold.
You can be sold a special ointment.
Right.
That's the key.
And yeah,
that's actually now what was a shitty metaphor became a great metaphor.
and this is a metaphor of the cancer too, just expanding and expanding to deal with things when at the root it could be solved.
By not performing an action in the wrong way in the first place, which is the point of the feedback observation method, to see which methods go spiraling out of control like this versus the methods that keep the cycle clean and like oiling up a mechanism to make sure it's running as smoothly as possible.
Sure.
That's maintenance in a nutshell, right? Adding nutrition is actually like an opposite for hygiene. Hygiene is concentrated about the removal of unnecessary things, whereas
Mhm.
nutrition is about the addition
Yeah.
of necessary
Inputs.
things. Yeah, but it's actually like an opposite, in the sense that hygiene has to take care of what nutrition brings in is acceptable. Nutrition has to make sure that what hygiene gets rid of is acceptable at the same time. So it's really an interrelated correlationship, except
What
one is
hygiene gets rid of is acceptable.
so you don't want nutrition. Nutrition says like, okay, you know how some people will like stop eating foods because of fads and all that jazz.
Right.
So like people become vegan, people become vegetarian, people become blah 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 blah.
They do.
Right? So they're cleaning things out of the environment. But nutrition will say things like, you as much as this seems like dirt to you, in a greater scheme of things, it's not. Right? It just needs to go through a further process, if you will, to not be that. Nutrition will put the brakes on hygiene, saying you can't get rid of this. Like you can't get rid of sugar, you can't get rid of fiber, you can't get rid of, right, things that you need.
Yeah.
Because hygiene,
Well,
like,
yeah.
like an out of control immune system could kill you
Um.
by removing your internal organs to the outside. Right?
Yeah, I get it.
Like hygiene on its own is not
yeah,
sufficient.
so we want to kind of come back to the holonic model here, and so this is the way I see hygiene is getting rid of everything that isn't the archetype coming up,
Right.
and then
But
the
what
way
t-
that
what-
the archetype interacts.
Nutrition
is
tells you
nutrition.
what is the archetype so that it doesn't get rid of that. That's the relationship. So nutrition would pose to hygiene, that's an archetype. That's the archetype. Do not clean that out. Right? It puts the brakes on it.
Sure, as a thing building up, but you would
Yeah.
assume that within hygiene though too.
No,
sort of.
Within hygiene, left to its devices, if you will, it will get rid of everything so that there's nothing left to fuck up. Right?
Okay,
Ultimately, this is nihilism.
we can look at shelter too as hygiene, right? Shelter is protecting something. It's protecting
Right.
the archetype.
Right. Shelter and hygiene are interrelated in the sense of the activity of hygiene will then be to remove things that break the shelter apart. How does it know what doesn't break the what to leave behind to keep the shelter together is nutrition. That's the protocol that informs it of that. Do not get rid of this substance. Do not get rid of that substance. This is fuel. This is that. This is the other thing.
Yeah. Okay. So in a holonic stacking sense, I see that because one layer controls the ones below it.
Mhm.
Always, we're seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fine.
And rest in this case imposes a situation where like you're not supposed to overspend the energy doing this thing. You're supposed to balance that out. Right? You can't be in you cannot be in panic
So here we
mode
go.
to fix those two things.
Shelter is more of a sort of dumb fact of existence of the archetype itself.
Right.
And the nutrition or sustenance is
An abstract border, if you will.
is the
Elements that keep the abstraction going.
a bigger picture of economically sort of
Right. The mechanisms that underlie the quote-unquote materialization of said shelter. The shelter is an emergent phenomena of sustenance and maintenance.
So
And the community would be an emergent phenomena of a sheltered maintenance and sustenance.
yeah, we went too far.
Of many what do you call it?
Units.
Units doing the same thing, replicating.
Yeah, so if we're looking at using a holonic model at the bottom with environment, we're seeing an archetype. right? So the fact of the archetype doesn't mean the archetype will still keep existing always, but in general, we know that that everything that's not the archetype doesn't need to be there.
Right.
But to further know what does
Isn't-
need to be there is the interaction between the archetypes, which is the model, and that's we're getting into sustenance now. So we're seeing the more complex interactions between these archetypes in this layer. And that's our nutrition, which of course says what you can and cannot get rid of because we need certain things to be there.
Right. It puts the brakes on what you get. So hygiene is like a cleaning mechanism, and nutrition is a mechanism of both intake and brakes on what is cleaned and how.
Right.
It needs to. It has to be an entire model of what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So look, and this is why it's the model slot. Nutrition classifies what works and what doesn't for the entire archetype that is we are uncovering through hygiene.
Not to mention whatever's coming up from the archetype, as in shelter, what shelter is seeing, what hygiene is seeing, is being created and lifted up through layers below, where we see further nutrition, whatever modeling happening, just shunting up into the current view.
Right. Hygiene is done in terms of nutrition. Nutrition is done in terms of rest. Rest is done in terms of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is done in terms of fitness. So rest, nutrition, and hygiene are all done in terms of fitness to the current state of circumstances. So nutrition is guided by whether it's fit for whatever environment the
But
shelter is in.
I guess what I'm pointing at is that this is all connected to a much bigger system of stacks and all this kind of stuff. In that the cells, they know what nutrition they need. They know what they're letting in. They know what they're letting out. We're talking about the mind here, which has a map of nutrition and says, okay, I need to get rid of that and do this and eat this and not eat that and clean this before I eat it.
So when you're talking about that, you're actually talking about rest. In a default rest state, if you will, of like just and it's natural ongoing, there is a pull towards nutrition and a pull towards hygiene that it always is swinging between, because all of its entire existential framework is
Right.
based on these elements of sustenance and nutrition.
And this
And
kind
shelter.
of rings back to the probably long ago discussions about shelter and sustenance and the maintenance of the two, in that if it were as simple as shelter, we'd build a concrete sphere around our body and we'd sit there for eternity.
In fact, we would use our body as the concrete sphere and just leave it at that.
Whatever.
Because we already
Right.
have one, right? We're isolated from the environment by our skin.
No, but something could still come along and destroy it, right? So if it was that simple, no, but we need to actually take in from the environment.
I mentioned this because we already have a shelter in the body, in a sense.
Sure.
And all of these kinds of nutrition and rest and whatnot can actually be articulated in that framework. Breathing, right? That's a matter of sustenance. You have to intake the extrinsic environment, internalize it, process it somehow,
Yep.
and not get rid of it until it's been done so via hygiene. So you can't get rid of your oxygen before you've actually used it up. For example,
You can.
you die. That's what.
Oh, no, I mean,
that's what pneumonia is.
I mean, you can just breathe out before and the oxygen doesn't all get absorbed by the lungs, but you can
right.
still breathe
This
out.
is what we call pneumonia.
No, there, I just breathed out most of the
No,
oxygen
no.
that I breathed
See,
in.
even in that small,
most of it got fine, digested, whatever, but still some of it went out.
It's the fact that your lungs are wet. As soon as you breathe that gas in, it just splatters itself all over the surface area.
Yeah, but not all of it's gone.
Not all of it, but most of it is already absorbed. Anyway,
Sure.
My point on this is not so much about the speed of breath or any of that. My point is that no matter how much shelter you've built, like the idea of concrete shelter, right? Like the idea to isolate the outer environment entirely from
Yep.
the inner one is not feasible. It needs to be permeable in some sense. You need to intake.
Of course.
You need to intake elements from it,
Yep.
and so
Typical.
permeability is a part of the shelter.
Typical.
And we got to remember that the shelter, as far on the one side, it does look like a typical corporation, but on the flip side, all it does is shield the inner workings of the ephemeral proximity guild interactions. So there is no CEO, but there is a CEO when the time arises. You know. The only question I don't have answered in the scheme is how to apply this in a legal sense, because I'm sure there's breaks within the system to put us to freeze up representation.
You
would.
always have to have at least a pseudo representative, which takes from
Right. So the idea is, while we are creating a shell company, not to be the typical shell company. What is a shell company in general, if not a method of theft? Right. Like it's a method of laundering. In the general sense, and here
Usually.
we're posing ourselves as another shell company, but not doing the laundering, at least not that kind of laundering. What we're laundering is not finances specifically; it's meaning, right? It's not a product, but rather. This is the part where recognition
Yeah.
between the system and us separates and goes its own separate ways.
right. The tree of we're laundering the tree of life.
Right, in a way that makes it invisible to the system. Hopefully, makes it invisible to the system, and yet applicable to participants at the
Still
same time.
still functioning.
Yeah, such that they don't have to be harassed for participation.
Right. Yep. Yep. Break time, perhaps.
I'm okay
Okay. All right.
for once.
Then we'll give it at least a few more minutes until we break.
You can go if you need.
Break for a sec. You want a monologue? Should we tee you off?
About.
Tee you off.
Give me something to monologue on. I'll get my smoke ready.
So focus. How far have we gone?
Whoa, okay.
Have we gone as far as we should go with focus? Okay, so inner and outer, right?
So
Of hygiene, of nutrition.
yeah.
So describe what it's like with the body and the mind, right? That's I think the big divide. You can say
Yeah.
environment in place of body. But
Yeah, so we started off with saying focus is not supposed to be about focus on what, but if
So,
focus is focus.
I'll be right back.
And by that we said, okay, are we, so let's, again, going back to hygiene. Hygiene of what becomes the wrong question, simply because we're looking at a situation where we're not applying it to this situation or that situation or another situation, but we're looking at all situations in terms of, well, where does hygiene fit into that? And so with that, it becomes more of a lens through which all other activities are done. So this is the main kind of the main purpose behind saying focus through that. So hygiene being one element, nutrition being the second element we've discussed in length, being a kind of like counterbalances of each other. On the one hand side, you have within a given situation, what are you trying to move out of that situation? What are you trying to bring into that situation to reinforce it and become more stable, so on and so forth. It could be the body, it could be any abstract idea. It doesn't really matter what level of abstraction we're looking at. And right, so those are like the most obvious interactions that we could think of in terms of stuff going out, stuff coming in, input, output. In general, most things interact on that level. But then we get into the rest, which is a bit more abstract than that. What does it mean to look through everything through the lens of rest? Well, going back to the way we're framing everything, rest would be a kind of a default point of view. Yeah, a kind of a default point of view through which you assert where nutrition, where hygiene need to counterbalance each other. It's a matter of keeping an equilibrium of where both lenses are constantly reiterated in terms of themselves, in terms of each other. It's the ability to do this sort of like without putting any further energy into it, to rest in that perspective, if you will, and sort of not use it as some form of artificial systemic knowledge that it lives in an abstraction out there, but rather to sit in the default mode of interpreting nutrition, everything through the lens of nutrition and hygiene as in a form of a default interpretation, without again spending more energy and effort into it. So rest becomes like a balancing point for the other points of focus, in that they become ubiquitous and they don't necessarily differentiate in terminology anymore. So hygiene is nutrition, nutrition is hygiene. Those become one and the same. You wouldn't start to take action. What?
Keep going.
You wouldn't start to take action that violates the rest.
Oh, you can come up and be a guest speaker on the live stream. Just for fun. Come on, you can do it. Guest speaker. Hey, how's it going? You remember me, right? Oh, we've got beer, but you're more than welcome. We're discussing the life now. I'll unlock the door. Yeah, door's unlocked. Do you need help? We have hands.
Surprise guest speaker, or perhaps not a guest speaker, but time to exercise fitness in the whole scheme, isn't it? I guess we're going to exercise fitness.
Oh no.
As a counterbalance to our rhetoric.
Oh no.
Putting our shit to the metal.
Mm-hmm. So, about rest.
Hey,
Welcome.
long time.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm all immune.
Oh yes.
I got the shots, man. I got the shots.
Yep. And welcome Gabor to the live stream. We've been going for a couple hours, but we're always open to changing topics, subjects,
Yep.
ideas, whatever anybody wants to talk about. We're highly responsive to chat and real life interruptions and Zoom interruptions.
We're trying to tell them we're not very formal.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. So we are. I don't know if you remember much of talking to me, but we're still on the same subject.
Yeah.
it's the same, yeah.
Yeah. It's we've developed a weird, what I would call a weird, what most people would call a weird model about like, you know, I think at this point, this is just me talking. Don't take this too seriously, but we've kind of made bridges between, well, what does politics have to do with the universe? You know, things like that.
That's crazy.
Politics.
Like, why does the universe produce politics, and why is this the way to go? For example.
Also,
Just weird shit like that.
how do you do a group of people in a community, like, but in a healthy, wholesome way?
Without shitting on each other.
Yeah.
I think
Simplify.
it's the most pragmatic way.
Simplify.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is simple in theory, but complex in
Execution.
that we have this whole society and civilization, and it's all bound together, and nobody wants to hear anything about anything else.
And
But
this
there,
system, that system, this other system telling you this, that, the other thing.
yeah,
So our idea is really like, well, like in your body, right? Do you have a president cell? Right, your whole body is cell,
Yeah.
cell. But nobody's a president. Nobody is like in charge,
Mhm.
right? Like that idea. So the collection of things do not need authority to work together. For example,
That's exactly a
For
really
example.
good.
we're
Mhm,
humans are autonomous by nature. They don't need authority to tell them to be good, bad, the other thing. It works together usually. We don't see that anymore because with generations after generations
Being
and
told.
in our society, nobody knows people like that anymore, right? So
Yep.
now, of course, if you take away authority, it goes to shit because nobody knows how to do anything. But the idea is like DNA knows how to build a body.
Yeah.
Internally, we're born with all the tools to build us work without any systems, if you will. So our argument is basically that this is still true. Even after all this time, this is still true, and there's still a way to behave
To do it
and
like
act
that.
and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Even after all the damage we've done to our environment, to our
Yeah.
mental structures, to the way we think, there's still a way to go back to a kind of a more. A lot of people hate the word natural, right? Because a lot of people think natural is just
Hippies.
hippies, right? But what we're saying is natural from this point of view, like we already have the inner structure. We just need to like build on top of it to get the outer structure well again,
Yeah.
right? But we've done so much shit to not build like our society doesn't let kids grow up properly.
Yeah.
by
exactly, yeah.
saying you have to think this way, you have to think, so they don't know how to think, they don't know. Well,
Yeah.
so if we remove the big idea, if we remove all of this kind of stuff we do, what would grow is actually also okay, like not a big problem for legalism or any of the problems we're so afraid of.
Potentially.
If we remove society's law, for example, a lot of people are afraid everything's going to go to shit, right? But the idea is that if we grow up being ourselves, that is not going to be the problem. That's kind of like the
Mhm.
big picture we're talking about.
Sort of, yeah. And there's a lot of things in the way. Like the cell analogy, like the body. Is there a president's cell? Well, no. The cells know what to do, but what if each cell had like a little tube attached to some central feeding station, and to do all their functions they had to route through that central station, right? What happens when you disconnect all your body's cells from the central station? They don't know what to do. They don't know what they do. That's not true though. Our bodies has cells which are very smart, quote unquote, and they do
But
their function
Well, we built our society that way, right?
as the central feeding tube. But so like our body all comes together as a CEO of what we feel is our conscious experience of being in command of our body, right?
Mhm.
But in the same way, I'm a cell, you're a cell, you're a cell. There are cells out there. We're also on an even playing field for something bigger, right? And that can be, do we all have the feeding tube going to some central thing, or are we all thinking for ourselves to,
And
to do
cooperating.
to do interactions like a cell does?
So for us, nature would be like doing it like the cell does.
Mhm.
Nobody needs to feed us anything.
I know Gabor gets it. He doesn't really, you don't need the introduction. I know you understand
No, yeah, like it's
kind of like nature and all that,
Yeah.
and how fucked up society is. Pardon.
yeah,
French.
because like remember we talked about it one time, like where we should start, and then what
What
we
to
have
do
to
about
do.
it.
And
Yeah,
then I said
yeah.
a lot of we have to learn how to learn.
Education, yeah.
That's all. That's like literally, we spent maybe 40 hours just trying to explain why that's the case.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to learn, because if you just learn how to do that, you're not learning about learning. What happened to you? You don't.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, and you go your entire life through that, as soon as something comes at you, you're so blinded. You don't know what to do with it.
So,
anymore.
Gabor, you described what we call feedback, basically learning how to learn. So, if I learn how to do, some job, how to do this in mechanics or something, if I'm taught and told how to do something, but I don't know how to learn, when I do it, if something goes wrong or if my model is incorrect,
You don't know
it's
what the
going to
fuck do.
mismatch.
You can't.
It'll mismatch from reality, and I will never find a way back home how to fix it.
And we're
Right.
moving towards mentalities that work only like that,
Right.
and never going back to, well, how did this start? How did this?
Credentialism,
Yeah.
certificationalism, all that.
Yeah, you're told this. You're told superficial level. Look, I mean, you went through school. We all went through school. You only taught that up here. You don't know. You don't know why this guy said this, or why he thought this, or where the life was, or any of that stuff. We're not
Mhm.
getting any of that stuff anymore.
Mhm.
In fact, this is why I got so enthralled with Norse mythology, because it's to me the way I see Norse mythology, it's sitting on a fence between civilization and the old ways. On the one hand side, they've already met medieval kings, medieval everybody, so they know civilization. They're not.
No, yeah.
Yeah, they know what it is, but their gods and their thinking and the thing are so old, right, that the Christians can't even understand why they behave the way they behave, right? Like, everybody's story of Thor is different. Everybody's story of Odin would be different, because, like, it's not in a Snorri was Snorri, but before Snorri, it's poems and people talking, right?
Yeah, the brave beside a fire.
So, exactly. So my Thor and your Thor are not the same Thor, but that didn't never matter until we wrote it down in a book, right? And now the book tells you you're
what
wrong.
it's the real, yeah,
Right.
what it's the real story.
Yeah.
And that kills. It kills society in a way. It doesn't actually promote it. It kills it.
Mhm. Yep.
It kills the
Back to the externalization of memory.
yeah. It kills the adoptive relationships, for example.
That's a long way back.
Hail Zumi.
This is where we're digging.
I know, but like that's what I mean. It's like I had some these kind of discussion, and then I was always like too radical for other people.
Nah.
we are.
We know the feeling.
currently-
No, but
we
like I'm not.
currently are
Yeah,
We're in
there.
good company.
and then like even it said like what is like it was the question is like what was the most damaging period of humanity since we know and whatever, and then
The Dark Ages or whatever.
World
then-
War
and then-
Two.
no, that's like, but like I said, like
Well, it's
probably
a meat grinder.
a lot of problems started when they invented monocropping, like
Yep.
agriculture.
We are talking about that all the time. In fact, so some of it is based on papers I've read, and some of it is my own
Theory.
like thinking about
Yeah.
it. So it's not. It has its. I don't know how far in the truth it is, but grasslands did not open up until the last ice age. So humans beforehand did not have access to huge fields of grass of any kind. So ice age recedes. That's kind of how I understand the story to go, and tribes begin to utilize crops not for food, because you think about it, famine, you're dead, right? Like you can't rely on crops as your main food source at that point. You don't have infrastructure, you don't have nothing.
You're still hunting,
You're still-
gathering.
you're still
Yeah,
hunting.
hunter and gatherers.
So,
It's
so
like-
all of the grasses we have, corn, we have wheat, we have poppies, we have wheat, we have all of these different grasses. They were not used for food. They were used for booze,
Alcohol.
alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of a sudden, what happened is that something that was only available a little bit of took a lot of work to produce. Like if you to produce a narcotic, right? You have to work
Mhm.
on it. And now you have this cheap supply of alcohol, right? And of course, the lucky tribes sitting there going, "Let's drink, come, let's drink." So that's what that's what's called the beginning of feast economy, the economy of where feast become the main produce. So take a few generations of that, and now you have a situation where, like, you know what? We own these fields, and you come drinking on it with us. Why don't you work the fields?
And we'll
You know,
own
and
we'll
we'll
own
and
them.
we'll own them, and we'll and now you have the beginning of debt.
Yeah.
And the other thing that
And then soon as you own something, you have to protect it.
and the other thing that grass has provided is it's the first time we have a crop that is storable, countable. You can count it, and you can transport it far away.
Store it. Yeah.
Everything to do
Mhm.
with beginning of money.
Yeah.
Right in the crop. So it's the crop fields that gave us the money. Started with the feast economy. Feast economy became debt economy. Debt economy became slave economy. And slave economy is the birth of civilization. And so right from the very get-go, you have slavery. You have the marginalization of women and children because they can't work. The
Yeah, like
fields.
everything
Mu-
divided by
we
muscle.
we call high muscle is now is what costs money, and so you have now a situation of men and women being different, children and adults being different classes of people.
Mhm.
Division happens artificially because now we can learn how to count. We can say you belong in this category, number one. You belong in this category, number. So
Yeah.
counting creates a different problem altogether by categorization, and
Mhm.
this is what we call great civilization birth. Like all of it is disgusting. Like all of it is slavery. All of it is sexism. All of it is racism. Like there,
Yeah.
you cannot separate civilization from every single problem we socially have.
Right now.
And
that-
then
that's
the
topical.
thing is, like, a lot of the, let's say, like, if you go back to the Romans back in the 400s,
Well, they were the
they had like the Roman Empire had exactly the same problems as a today's society in let's say United
in
States
Greece
or
in Greece
or
same
because
before it.
yeah, they had they had immigration problems, they had
because
infrastructure
because
problems.
because they had in and out, right? Like if you have a mentality
Right.
that these people are good, these people are bad, all civilization created barbarians. Why was there a conflict? Because
It's
on the
not
one-
the Roman way of
Right.
living. That's the barbarian. It's not how savages
so the
they
people
are.
so the people that did the crops, the people that did all of the infrastructure,
They are civilized.
they were like, wait a minute, well, our gods are so much better because look, You guys are so.
Yeah, because you're just wandering around outside.
We need more slaves. So why is there a big conflict between the two groups immediately? Because one insists on taking over the other side, and the other side is going, fuck off. Also, hey, you got good shit. Right? Because up until that point, nobody owned anything either. So taking something from the land,
It was
fine.
It was given.
It was a given. And so
Yeah,
now,
like
now you're
taken
walking
because,
into an empire.
What I call the passage through a land meant more than actually taking something from the land, because they had no concept of ownership of the land.
Right.
Only the right to pass.
To have good relations. Right?
Yeah.
To be human.
Yeah.
Of
Oh,
all
when
th-
you
of
get,
all
hey,
things.
I got this, you got
Yeah,
this, and then let's go. I can go through.
Basic respect, which
Yeah.
is so interestingly fuckingly lost on us. We can't even talk to you. Like, if you message me on the street and I ask you for something, it's like, fuck off, buddy. Right? Like, it's
You know,
you know, I don't mean you and
I know,
me.
I know what you mean, but like even to this day, it still bothers me sometimes when like say, hey, how are you? I'm good, and
Yeah, there's no
like,
conversation there.
But
There's
like
nothing.
it's just like back in the old days, like when like you know you seen your next door neighbor, and then you said how good morning, and then you said fuck off, then you know he's pissed off.
Yeah.
But at least
Well, this is
he
what-
expressed his feelings.
At least
Well, this
you
is
know.
why here,
At least you know where to start.
Here, you're supposed to smile at people, right? You go to Russia and you start smiling at people, they're going to be like, what the fuck are you on? Which drugs are
But
you on?
yeah, because you're not really showing through emotions, and you're not
The fakeness of it.
Yeah, it's just
Sure.
like the smoke in the mirror, basically.
Yeah.
And then,
So yeah, this is our basic discussion.
Yeah.
but then the next one was again like you know, as soon as you start monocropping and stuff like that, then you end up
It's
with
sterilizing.
germs.
It's you're sterilizing what you need, the ecosystem, and then you're getting
Then you're
A
getting
disease.
like because like nature
because you're making easy vector of
out
attack.
of
What do you mean-
balance.
what do you
But
mean
the only
germs?
thing is like what I would say is like
When you
when
have
they say
when you have a monocrop, it's susceptible to disease. So like
Yeah.
Like
we had
bananas.
we had banana extinction scares.
We know about
oh
that.
like bananas.
Oh,
Like
we
one of
don't
the
have
biggest-
bananas anymore. We don't have
like
a particular.
banana look like.
No,
Okay.
there
I
used
see
to
the
be
point.
there used to be a particular type of banana that was extremely tasty that we don't actually have any access to anymore. It died.
Because of the
one?
the over. No, I still need to work and then.
That's how I work though.
But and then
That's how we
that's
work.
the other thing is yeah like monocropping. It's with the
Yeah.
Wheat is going through the same problems actually. There's been a few scares
and
with
then
wheat.
that's why then when the,
It's monoculture is another,
Yeah, monoculture
it's a more
is
generic
definitely-
word for it.
We are definitely not for monoculture because of for a lot of these reasons.
Hmm.
But we're trying to do this with civilization too. We're
the
trying
only
to create a
biggest problem
monoculture.
would be is we are way overpopulated on
You
this
mean
earth. In order to
civilization is trying to.
I don't think it's it's not population, it's concentration problems.
That's
Let's-
yeah.
it's
Like
pro-
I would
That's
say
part of
I
it.
would say
I believe though the Earth can actually support the number
Even
of
more.
us if we fucking took care of it.
that's exact. But like
If
the
we
only
did that.
thing is like you know you
We
got
don't.
way too many like on certain spots like way.
So how
too
do we make that pattern happen where we are taking care of it? That's what we're talking about. The guild.
Oh no, it's like.
Can it
it's-
happen? Can it
So
happen? How can it happen?
but again, the answer to the question is tough because we're looking at it from the same perspective as nature. You got to get the DNA going so that you, me,
But then-
he,
Right.
at least believes to some extent to one core element that is human across all of us.
Right.
And then
You
start.
that talk about love, you
and
know,
then
like
start like if you do laws, if you make any
it
decisions,
has to take everybody.
it has to be from bottom up,
Yes.
not from top
That's
down.
like DNA
Yep.
builds the cell, like DNA builds the body.
From
Yes.
from this
From the
side,
bottom
like you
up.
know,
So we have
getting
to share
involved
something.
bottom up,
So we have to share something.
because then
Correct.
anything comes top down, by the time it reaches the bottom, where this
It
mostly
forgets
matters,
everything.
Now wait,
Then-
hold
oh.
on. Our version, quote unquote, of top down is the fact of state and the fact of words themselves and having a structure, a reality top
Myth,
down.
a myth.
So a myth, yeah, sure. There is
So
there is a
when you
top
sp-
down and a bottom up.
so
They
when
both
you-
have to be there
So
together.
when you speak words,
Yeah.
You
so
don't
when
ha-
speak words,
right.
it's not a dictionary that says this word means this word means that, this word means. It's actually the story above the words that tells you this word means that.
But when
Right,
when
something
it comes
higher.
to environmental decisions, it has to come from the local people,
right, which
like the input.
but okay, so take that,
Yep.
but like create a myth that covers the whole.
Right.
And so every local person knows this myth.
a
and
myth that the
he's-
people know.
and then they go, okay, yes, that's how I'm going to grow into that myth. So the myth has to cover the reality somehow.
And that
It doesn't have to be.
that,
It's not science. We're not talking about science. We're talking about a story that makes sense to living.
And this is a different type of top down from authoritarianism, which is where somebody says, "Oh, I am the centralized cell that I govern everybody, and this is what you all
you have
must
to.
do."
You have to understand the myth. You have to take in the
So-
myth.
That's one way of controlling. That's one way of having a layer above all the cells, a layer higher. You can say, "I'm the master cell." You can also have a myth that says, "We are all a bunch of cells working together to do something higher." That's what we believe.
Two
Yeah.
different myths.
That's what we're going to do.
And
That's from the
therefore you-
bottom up,
and so
but
the
it's
meaning-
also the myth itself is the top down, right?
Yeah. But the
so
myth-
there is that connection, that
But
loop.
but the myth coming top down reflects from the bottom.
That's the whole
Right. It has to
idea.
be the
That's
mirror.
because then you have to get some input for the people that
This
are
is
actually
why I
touching the earth,
That's why I
Yeah.
love Norse so much
because they're so connected to nature, so
The
connected
gods
to
are.
their and then even the Norse, they say, well, like sometimes you have to fool the gods.
Some just,
the best thing
little
I-
tricks here there.
No. You know what? I've heard something similar, even better though. It was a bunch of people that would always say things like "fuck you, God," like to the gods themselves. And then when they were asked, like, "Aren't you afraid of like retribution or whatever?" It's like, well, no, because if we're going to be friends
Right.
with
I
the
could
gods,
say
That's like the
whatever I want.
closest. That's the closest
He makes
relationship.
fun of me too. He makes my situation.
Oh, hell yeah.
He fucks up my life. I'm going to make fun of him too. Right? It's
That's
a
wholesome.
relationship
Yep, I see
of
that.
friendship, of being with, not under, not anything like that. And I love it.
Yeah, but that's
You
what I mean.
love
like
it, yes,
it's
but, and this also bumps into weirdly participation in most spiritual systems, any presentation, Christianity, whatever else, is that
Sorry, I gotta take a whiz. Be right back. My bladder never grew up with me.
enjoy.
I will, I guess. Nature.
Just my point was that some bystanders, people may hear things and get the wrong idea, like, "Oh, fuck you, God," with your middle finger up, right? And what, but somebody who's just learning about a religion, to give it respect, they don't. That can be tough to see that
yeah.
and be like, "Wait, what's going on?"
Because religion, you would think it's unconditional, subordinate, like submission, and
Correct,
then
yeah.
follow.
But this is the dysmorphic model. This is the taking a beta perspective. Well, there has to be that relationship.
Yeah.
It can't be a one-way street in however you feel it or see it. In other words, if it is, it's ends up creating disharmony problems in how you feel and relate to the world. But yeah, that's a great point. I know I read some like Inuit myths as well,
Yeah.
or stories about their relation with God sometimes, and it's like that making like Asiania, like how like there's some Inuit stories as well
Oh yeah.
relating to like how you would like some people talking to God and relating while they're on the hunt, to make fun even in a dirty and sexual way or whatever, and like it doesn't even like just totally
Yeah, they don't give a shit about it.
disregard God, quote unquote, but it's the relationship that you have. And
With the situation.
the point in the moment is that everybody laughed their asses off because they thought it was funny to mock God like that. But meanwhile, this is the just
And you
joy.
wouldn't
The joy
I don't like
coming
the
up.
word God in this situation. I like a spirit or more
Mock that particular spirit.
Yeah.
Fine.
because God in English implies like authority and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yes, like,
whereas the understanding of these people is not
So-
at all.
we are speaking to the nature that we encounter as God, the whole of all of what we is that we see and encounter and engage
Yeah.
with.
Like we talk to it as a we always talk to the world as a person anyway.
Right.
It's just
We all believe
it's
in
just
God.
a way of saying
We all
yeah,
believe-
I do that.
We all believe more than we think we do
Yeah.
in God.
Yeah,
In
because
reality.
it's,
All you need to do is watch a person hit their pinky toe on the table. Why do they hate the table? What did you know what I mean? Like the mentality of it, the table being the problem of a spirit, of somebody that did this to you, never leaves. It never leaves. And all you need to do to see it is watch a person go through pain. Like it's right there. It never leaves. You know. And this and children. You have children?
oh yeah, like I got grandkids. You know.
Oh, okay. So you've seen it. You've seen it many times. Then I'm observing my children. They look at everything as if it's alive, right? So, and if you look at
This is
old
bring us back to animism.
yeah, if you look at old spirituality practices, they don't change that for children. They never interfere with that. They allow it to grow into itself, and then they become parts of the society, part of the society, because the language, the myth, and whatever gives the meaning behind the experiences and whatnot. So they don't need to rebel. There's no teenage rebellion. There's only initiation into the tribe, right? Like people, they want to go into it. Why? Like from our perspective, it looks like it's a crazy ritual and everybody should be anxious, right? It's like going through your tests in high school or exams in college or whatever. People there did not see themselves as, anxious about it. It was your time. It was time to go. Did you ever hear about the caves in France, the deep caves that they discovered with the cave paintings and all of that stuff?
I
So, why they're important is they're like really old cave paintings, one of the oldest ones we've ever found. But the second thing to it is that to get down there takes a lot. So if you don't have technology, it's like a life or death sort of situation.
Which I'm sure people did.
Then yeah, it's a rite of passage kind of thing into adulthood. And for the longest time, they look at those cave paintings and they're like, what the fuck is this? Because you'd see like one body and multiple heads, right? And like just like weird kind of things. But all this time, they've been looking at it under electric light. So you see where I'm going with this?
Candle.
They didn't
different.
have electric light back then. So we would have
Torch.
fire. And fire flickers, moves, light moves
Yep.
all the time. So when you look at it, somebody had to finally got the idea to do that. So they started looking at those pictures as under fire and moved the fire. And now all of a sudden you see animation. The deer, it's not two heads, it's a deer moving its head from down to up.
Nice.
like
it's
that.
the same when I was a kid, like I draw like a moving picture.
Yeah, yeah.
I did, and then but you
So, but how old is animation now? Now we're looking at tens of thousands of years.
moving picture.
And not only just a moving picture, but they would use the shape of the rock to be the shape of whatever they're drawing around, right? So it was a 3D moving picture, not just... these guys were artists, and on top of that, art was a rite of passage. To be able to do that alone in some dark fucking cave somewhere was seen as like achievement, right? We look at all this progress and we look at that and we're like, that's not an achievement, blah, 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 blah. But every single one of these people will die trying doing this. Every single one of them.
Lots of them.
No, all of them.
They all die.
Especially
But,
because of their
that
mentality.
was the other another question too. Is like again with the Dark Ages and stuff like that, because they said like once the Christianity got a hold of most of the Europe,
Mm-hmm.
then that's when Dark Ages begin. And then if you really look at the, even I said like the perfect example to verify it on my word is like look at all the inventions,
Mm-hmm.
like the fire, bronze,
Iron.
iron,
Iron is a
everything.
big one.
Yeah, everything.
'Cause
What
you have to the temperature
temperature
for
control
iron,
and
yeah.
this and that, and then
Mm-hmm.
you got like the sailing, the boating, and everything, and then all of a sudden by 800s, when
Nothing.
when Christianity fully blossomed through Europe, nothing. There was no inventions. Like I mean, like it's not.
But irony of all ironies, the average life of a peasant in the Dark Ages got easier, because there was all the control was gone, right? Like the not everybody. There's pockets and times differ. I'm not saying everybody got. There was
Yeah.
there was obviously problems and blood and all that stuff, but the average life, if you look at the overall of Europe, because of the top part disappeared, right after Christianity took over, the average peasant life became leisurely. Everybody could work at their own pace. You know, like all of a sudden, all of the time that people didn't have,
It was
they
available.
got back. What turned it around is because Islam and Mongolia at the time continued doing the marketing. So as Europe was going through its stuff, all the shit was just holding state over here. And then as soon as Europe was ready again, it just Renaissance took over. The Renaissance is the
yeah,
bringing
but
back
like
of-
that. But what I was referring on the religious side is like soon as the Protestants and then all the other Calvinists and all the other religions started to pop up, and then all of a sudden then the new invention started.
yeah.
In
Catholicism is Catholicism, but here's the thing: the Catholicism is actually an interesting branch of Christianity, not because of its weirdness, but because of its mysticism. It was the first time since Judaism, because Judaism kind of killed mystic thinking. It started to say, no. Mystic thinking is over here, abstract. Real world is over here, and we can know that, and there's no mystery in the real world. Greeks did the same thing, but they said there are no gods at all.
This is
So
sort of like bringing
atheism and monotheism is the birth of Judaism and Greece, if you will.
this is like bringing back like Mahayana Buddhism into it.
Okay, that's going to
the-
complicate things.
What do they call it? So the Zen Pure Land.
Yeah.
It'd be like introducing Pure Land back into this
Buddhism
when we've been
started
thinking
off
let's
being
be
systemic.
intellectual and not be superstitious.
Yeah.
and all
Buddhism
this.
started off very academic, very systemic, very list. This is this is that. And then next phases of Buddhism was more like, well, this is the big reality. This is the God. This is how all the gods look. This is how the Buddha looks. So it became a cosmos. So first it was more personal. Then it was again.
But like that's why like my favorite people, they're still the Mongols,
I like Mongols too.
because
Tinger.
Oh yeah.
Is it correct? Is that the right way to say it? Tinger.
because like in the
Blue
12
sky.
in the 1200s,
I have high
like,
respect for them.
they
My mother doesn't.
the Russians they overrun the Russians, even Hungary too, because Hungary was big.
They
at
were
that time.
testing the waters before political problem happened, right? Like I think you know all of this.
But like even the Mongols, like they were religious people in their own way, but they had no concept of religious prosecution. They
Right.
did not
I-
know.
I-
They
I-
did not know that
or-
concept.
or
Wasn't that a shame to be unaware?
and when they came across it, they never understood it, which is great.
But
Because they had to have come across as they came across Islam, and Islam will always say, we're always correct, but they still didn't do that, which is
Understand.
good.
but
which is great.
one of the things is they always said like be a Mongol first, and then a religious person after.
This is the great world hack of religion. See, Zhenya, that's all we have to put into Portal Mountain, and then you can be anything you want.
And then but like that's the other thing is like even within the Genghis Khan's family, they were like some Nestorian Christians.
There was Christians, there was Islam made it into it,
Present
and Buddhists.
Buddhists.
Yeah,
Yeah, all these like
yeah.
they were within the same family. They
Yep.
sat at the same table,
And
but
ate.
then they ate, and then they respected each other's traditions
by Mongol way.
by Mongol way, but always be a Mongol first.
Because the
and then-
Mongol way was more about relationship than about things.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly, because they
And
were
that's-
nomadic people.
Okay, yeah. We're so
But that's
the
that's what
the
the
reason
same.
we're doing this is because we're trying to look at what something like this can look like on top of modernity.
Because even the Huns,
I know less about the Huns, definitely.
like I know a lot because like I'm a Hun.
Oh, every Hungarian will say that. I know that.
Yeah, I know, but like
I had another friend who was very proud.
but even those guys, they were like
I
there was a lot of there
just
was
know
even
Attila.
actually,
I know Attila. I don't know much about after.
and then even like a lot of Romans, they deflected
Defected, yeah.
to the Huns because there was
Deflect is when something's coming at you and you
oh yeah
push it away.
but
defect is to go to
go yeah.
out. Yeah.
And then they lived with the Huns.
Oh, so okay, Huns is Roman era.
400, early 400.
So end of Roman era.
Yeah, that's actually they pushed
There's the Goths.
Goths, and they pushed.
Are the Goths Huns or no?
No.
No.
They were
They're
more of
Germanic.
they were more of a what I called because they were coming from the Russian
Okay, Rus.
Ural region, pushed by the Huns, and then the Romans.
Oh, okay. I see what
The
you're saying.
Romans adapt like they let them in today's Bulgaria.
You're right.
Bulgaria and Yugoslavia, just below the Danube, and then that was the natural borderline for the Romans. But the Goths they screwed up the Huns because they were supposed to be allies against the Romans, and then they took off overnight. So when the Romans they took in the Goths, and then they couldn't handle around the Bulgarian area, so they
lost the entire
they
region.
transplant the Goths into Iberia all the way to Spain. And
that's why they came from two sides.
and then the Romans and then the Huns.
Did you say
they-
transplant the gods?
Goths.
Okay.
Goths.
Like just move the gods.
And then
over.
they
Okay.
and then the,
Never
Thor
mind.
was moved by humans.
and
They had
then
to smuggle him over here.
The Huns, that's why they hunted him down all the way to Spain.
Shit. And that's why they crossed Europe.
That's why they crossed Europe.
Jesus fucking Christ.
It's the same thing that the Mongols did. The same thing.
Oh yeah, like
With
you hide your enemy, they're gonna get you.
with the Cumans. Cuman. That was a nomadic tribe
If I
from
remember,
northern Russia.
okay, so up.
Up. like the over by the
I know
road.
more about the
Cumin.
India stuff. Not
Cumin. And then so when the Mongols came down, and then they came from the south, and they crossed the Caucasian mountains, like right on top of Georgia.
Yeah, I don't know the area, but
But like the Urals are coming down like that, the Caucasian mountains are like that. Those are the highest mountains in Europe.
okay, yeah.
And then the Christians were waiting for the Mongols on the other side of the mountain. And then the Mongols, they had a pact with the Cumans that once they cross the mountain, they're gonna unite, and then they wipe
the camp out. Yeah.
but overnight, again, the Cumans left, and the Hungary took him in. The Hungarians took him in, and then they gave him like they were like nomadic. This is like late of 1200s. Nomadic people in the Christian world. There was like gypsies basically.
Yeah. No, you don't take in nomads.
But like the Hungarians took him in.
So
all of a sudden, when the
Roman Catholic Church got a wind of it.
but like they did some kind of they kind of took a blind eye, because like they placed it on the borderline, so they would protect the borders of Hungary, and then when the Mongols showed up, then they said like, well, like, give us the Cumans, and then we leave you alone.
They didn't.
They didn't, and then they got
They
fucked.
didn't. Yeah, as is always with the Mongols.
Mongols. Yeah.
Goddamn Mongolians.
Even the Mongols, they said like, look, they gave to Hungary, and then they say like, we come from the
They're
same.
far more respectable than they are than
given
European.
credit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like
could
by
imagine.
far. Most of the
Having the
so,
mobility on the horse too.
So Genghis himself,
Yeah.
right? He avoided attacking anybody who did nothing against him. He literally like he would skip out hunting somebody down for the mere reason. Okay, we got his army. This is the part I know about India. There was like one guy that tried to disappear there. The state that he tried to disappear into said like, we want nothing to do with him. So
no, that's okay. I'm okay.
So instead
Okay.
so instead of going in to the state where he was hiding, they actually stayed out of the border. They let the state deal with him. Right? Like I don't remember what happened, but at the end of the day, they neglected to cross the river.
But the Mongols were relentless if they were after somebody.
Yeah, you
And
cross
only
a
if you
line,
cross
you're
the-
done.
Only you cross our way of
Well, that's
doing
how
business.
your reputation
And then
precedes
the whole
you.
thing, the whole
and nobody
Mongol
resists.
invasion, the
You
whole
can't.
Mongol invasion is that
And it only
like
ceased by politics.
on the northern side of that era's Mongolia, there was like a Muslim state, and then I think in Hungarian it says like Kwaziria, and then so the Mongol
Horde.
what it called Genghis Khan send
Emissaries.
and then he says, well, like, look, we got some presents.
I know about
let's
that.
do business.
As soon as you
And
fuck
then,
up the emissary, you're done.
Done. And then that's exactly
Like
what. and then,
Mongol law demands that emissaries are
Or-
untouched.
it's just like,
Like you do not touch the messenger. If you touch the
Yeah.
messenger, you're fucking fucked.
and then
It's good that people know that.
If you kill two of them, goodbye.
chop their heads off and send them back. They took all the
Wait,
goods.
there's two levels of fucked?
One of them is pre-battle. One of them is okay, buddy. I don't know what you were thinking, but you're gonna burn.
Well,
And
that's
nothing.
good
And there's
to-
gonna
good
be
to know.
nothing left of you. Nothing.
Yeah.
The first time around, maybe
But
you get your head.
Think about
chopped
like
off. Everybody
having
else
like
is
the
spared.
mobile army with horses and all
Yeah.
that kind of shit.
Because
You
They
can
only-
go-
they
you
only
can go
ever
here,
lost
you
to
can
other
go there.
nomads. They
But-
only ever lost to really other nomads.
You are like in a no man's land, just moving wherever the opportunity is best
But
to
you
just
know-
take whatever you need.
But you know the Mongol way of fighting.
Is
It
learn.
was
To learn.
teached in German, even in English military schools at the Second World War era. Just the concept of how to be mobile, effective, and then all these kind of, because like
Their
every single
strategies, yeah.
every single Mongol had 4 horses on him.
Yeah, just
To
with
go
him.
in, like that's like they picked those 4 horses out of like
And should something happen to the horse, guess what? Food.
eat it,
Food.
milk them, and then they were mostly mares. They can
Yeah,
milk
yeah. Oh
it,
yeah, the milk.
they can milk them, and then if anything happens,
Oh no, the milk was like a huge thing for them.
yeah, it's the same with the Huns.
No
And
doubt.
then so
That's,
can you
that's
imagine?
why we have the milk gene to digest it still. That's probably because of that shit. No, northern
Like
countries.
they even did booze out of milk.
Imagine like modern day army.
Kumis,
Corvette.
kumis.
Cookies. I'm playing a. There's a game out on PlayStation. Not that it's very important, but
We are limited to 20 minutes left to go with
That's fine.
the stream.
That's fine.
gentlemen.
I'm fine with the interruption, man. This has been a great day.
Don't-
After my damn
Oh,
raccoon
continue,
bite.
continue, please.
No,
I'm enjoying the history lesson.
Jesus,
I got 2 like
You got raccoon.
canine and,
Yep.
and the bottom tooth in here.
no way.
So yes, that was yesterday. Went to the hospital. I was up till 4 a.m. I didn't get home. 1, 2, 3 shots here. 1 here. 1 here. 1 here. I'm going in on Tuesday for another rabies shot.
Rabies.
And then I'm going in next week.
Did you catch
And
the
the
raccoon
way-
and
and the-
bring it in for sample?
I can't post this on Facebook because I'm already limited. My account is already on.
But he wants to
on-
kill certain
I
animals.
want to kill a certain raccoon. I don't have anything against raccoons, but this one I want to fucking murder. He'll ruin my whole night. I had such a good. I was with my dad like the entire night,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was sitting talking to him. What the fuck? Out of nowhere.
But it was just an accident, man.
Right.
Waiting to happen.
You didn't mean to.
Anyway.
You were way bigger than you looked.
I guess.
It made me way
Fuck,
more
man.
attractive for food
So yeah,
source.
I'm basically going to the hospital for the next month.
Son of a gun.
I know. Where were we?
Just talking about history and Mongols and
Yeah,
all kinds of crazy societies that have been the past. And
The game. Why I mentioned the game is because it's the Mongol invasion of Japan in Tsushima.
Yeah.
It's not an accurate historical game. It's a great
But it's-
story. It's a great.
Got
it's
to
a
do
Japanese
with the
story.
tsunami too. It's got
Oh
to
yeah,
do
yeah.
with the tsunami.
They used it. They used it. You like in the game, you do all of the finishing battles in the storm, because you use the storm to make sure that they don't.
But you know, by that time when they invaded, when they wanted to invade Japan, they already owned Korea,
they were, they were.
and then every single ship was built in Korea, that it went towards Japan.
So, like I was saying, the story itself is not historical. It's more dramatic.
Yeah.
Right. It's story-wise, it's great.
I have a good book if you want to read it. It's the Mongol Empire. It's really I really like it a lot.
yeah,
because
like
it was,
history, overall arc.
It was just about Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan is a very interesting person. The way he carried himself.
But he learned so. He was already 60 years old when he came to power.
He was smart.
But then he struggled to learn a lot. He struggled to learn a lot through, like, you know, he was in captivity.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
was
There's
like,
a good movie called Mongol.
yeah.
Have you ever seen
Yeah,
it?
I've seen the Russian movie.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah,
So it's beautiful.
it's beautiful. Yeah, it's actually way more beautiful than you
Than
would
real,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, because but it was yeah, like I
We don't kill children. He has to be this tall, above the
that was
above the
that
wheel.
was the Han way too.
Yeah, but you couldn't kill
If,
somebody
if, it
they-
was taller, it had
had
to be taller than the wheel
cart.
wagon,
the
cart
wheel
wagon.
of a cart. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that was And then the Huns, they had an
And he
interest.
used that. He used that to his advantage. He killed the person to get away because they wouldn't kill him. So he just took his chance and ran the fuck out. Met his lifelong friend throughout his childhood. Got captured again. Killed the motherfuckers that captured him again. Got together with his friend from childhood. They began an entire like clan thing, raiding and stuff. Started not seeing eye to eye because Genghis Khan was more
Visionary.
he was more of what you call progressive. He would eschew traditional positions in favor of skillful
Right.
personnel. So he
So
would
a true alpha in the sense of leader.
yeah. He wouldn't
Beta
put
to
you-
God, if you will.
Yeah, so he would do things against tradition in the sense that he would appoint people of importance that had nothing to do with him, for example.
But that was the other thing too.
And that angered
in
a
the
lot
Mongol,
of people.
because you said, like, you know, they were
His
living.
friend ended up attacking him at the end.
Yeah, like 10 people would be living together in yurts, and then they would have
war band, yeah.
and then they would have their own their animal, like 10 families, the animals and everything.
Families, yeah.
And then out of those 10 would be one elected as a sergeant.
Right.
And then so those 10 people would go under that sergeant when the
The alarm.
go. And then the 10 neighboring sergeants would elect a captain
Right. Continue the tens.
until you
Right.
get to a certain stage. But
Yeah,
if they
the
had
Mongol
the
army is
military,
one of the Romans and Mongols had one of the most organized armies like that. Yeah.
and then the only other
So
thing was
this is the marker machine stack, the alpha,
Oh, yeah,
beta,
there.
alpha beta fractal going
This-
up through fundamental to
But
significant.
That's
then
why the
the-
Mongols carried the torch
With-
for markets.
with King Shit himself of the Mongols
Genghis Khan.
at the top.
But then military schools, higher official, like higher positions, they were all awarded by merit,
Right. Which a
It's
lot of
not-
Mongols hated.
not by
Blood.
Tradition, yeah.
tradition,
Yeah.
merit.
I don't know
if
if
you
it was-
were good enough, like he had Chinese,
Yeah.
he had Koreans, he had Muslims, all kinds of people.
But this
that
was
if
that
they-
original thing, a Mongol first, and then whatever identity
exactly
on top.
And that's the
Exactly.
only way you survive there. But because if you stop doing that,
Then you
the
would be-
execution is very swift.
By one of many different factions.
Just like your own captain is right away, like
Mm.
immediately.
But like he had and then every single time when they advanced, and then like they only killed enough people to make sure, like they say, okay, we
That
put
that
the
was
arms
done.
down,
Yeah.
and then they just retrieved all the brain power.
Yeah.
Anybody, it didn't matter what color, what religion you were,
Yeah,
long as you
true.
were willing to work
Holy
for
shit,
for the Mongols, and then do these war machines, and then as soon as they advanced to the next city, they
So-
already had like a brand new war machine.
We need like a pleasant way to do this as a peaceful army of the guild.
Well,
No, you don't have
No.
to kill everybody
we're
first.
definitely not going to take the horde style. That
Horde-
style.
Yeah, golden horde style of teaching, but like
Your choice. Do you want the horde style or the
No,
easy
but like,
way?
There's a
but
nugget
the-
of truth in it. There's a nugget of truth. The DNA part, for example, be Mongol first, be this first.
Yeah, but the
it
only-
resonates in many different ways across.
yeah, but the only
planet.
thing is, they were like by the time they hit Russia, let's say.
They got a
the Mongols-
reputation,
the Mongolians, they hit Russia, but then just don't forget, it's like they already conquered South Korea at that time. South Korea was the highest producing fine paper,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
and then
Administration.
administration.
Mhm.
So they sent so many flyers towards west, So every single time when they advanced from one city to the other, their reputation just grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
why
what
it's so
it
dark.
says. It says the only way you can tell that it's the paper
Fucking
production.
clever assholes, eh?
So
Paper
we need to do that
production.
with we need to do it with the guild.
Yeah.
That's
Flyers.
It says paper
Just print.
production and once the Mongol army started to advance west, paper production in Korea more than tripled
Right.
Of course.
because
And it's like before all these invasions, the Americans, whatever, you'd hear about the dropping paper
yeah,
little
pamphlets
squares,
or
That's the
pamphlets
same tactic. Yeah.
would fall over the enemy.
but it's the same thing.
And they all sit there reading it, and then a week later, the invasion happens, and they're all pre-programmed to think certain ways that,
Or like-
that the
or
enemy
just-
wants them to think, because they're gonna think they know. Okay, the population's gonna do this, and now we will do this secret trick to fuck them all up, because we pre-programmed them this way. We know their behavior, their model. We just gave it to them. We told them we're gonna do this. Now we're doing this. It was a deception. Now we're doing this.
Or
And
we're
shit's
doing
fucked
this
up.
too, but also this, but also this. But you
Right.
didn't know about that one, right?
Right.
Yeah, like but
Military
the Mongols
When
planning.
you go up the ass.
But the Mongols were the first one to exploit the Chinese labor too. They were printing
Well, I mean, Chinese were the
Bibles.
first.
They were printing Bibles in China
No
and
way.
selling it in on the
Middle East,
West,
yeah.
in the Middle East. All these relics and all kinds of
Jesus. Fucking Mongols, eh?
because
Just, yeah.
Goddamn Mongolians!
they ruled China for a while
I
too.
know, yeah. The
That's
Han
the-
Dynasty. no?
Before after the Han Dynasty.
Which one? Which dynasty was it? Song?
No, they were just the Mongols. But
But
like
they created their own dynasty too.
yeah, but then that's where the Forbidden City comes from. In China,
Right. I don't know
because
anything about
the
it.
Forbidden City it was actually
Yeah,
where the Mongol rulers lived
Oh.
because they were not willing to sleep in the house.
All right, a
They had the tent.
separate thing,
They had the tent,
right? With their
like the
alliances
Utes.
with the Chinese,
But then they
worked
did
this
not.
way.
They wanted to be present, like the Mongols. Like
There were a lot of rules that you couldn't break. To have the space that the Mongols just
yeah,
had to
but
be that way.
then they brought in like really like good revolution in the way of acknowledging like a lot of trades, like even play art, playwrights.
Well, even the thing
Like
like you
actors.
could use a tablet to walk safely from place to place to place. So you know, if you have the seal, you're protected, kind of thing. Like that idea itself is interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've seen it in any other empire.
Like
ever.
a
Or
pa-
they're the
pass,
postal
like-
postal
yeah, like-
system.
Like
The
people are
postal
looking at
system,
it, or what?
But you could get a seal, like an actual seal.
That other people
if
are
you're
seeing.
if you're holding this
Yeah.
and somebody touches you, they're fucked. Like
Right.
fucked.
So this introduces a problem of counterfeiting and a whole bunch of other
Oh,
technology. and all
but the
kinds of
thing
stuff.
is that would you put in the best of tech, so you to counterfeit that thing,
And
you'd have to
from-
have gold.
from
for
the
example.
idea of the central repository of the knowledge of society would be like a king. I know I authorized that person. Now somebody fucked with them, but they had
Marco
the
Polo
seal,
is a good show. eh?
But
right?
Marco Polo is
So
not
here's
fake.
here's the problem.
He
Here's the
was-
problem: is somebody creating their own seal and saying, "Oh, the king loves me, and I'm holding this thing." If you're gonna get mugged, you show it. It looks like authentic, but it's dark. It's at night.
But if you ever get caught
Right.
faking it, you are
But-
very fucked too.
But, hey,
Because
if you're, that's true, right?
I'm sure there was some.
Marco Polo. He had exclusive rights
to the con.
to do
Talk.
business with what I called with the Mongol Empire. They cut the Genoans out, everybody, because he was from what I called but he spied for the Mongols.
I don't know much about him.
So when the Mongols showed up in Europe, they already know, like, this town has 1,500 cows, 20,000 sheep,
Right. Okay.
and then this kind of crop,
Accounting.
and then if they and then they send like a pre-army, like 10,000 people, and then they wanted to create like a corridor for their horses. So they try to avoid large cities, so they can have enough. They burn the crops a year before the invasion, so the grass could come up next year,
Right.
and then they can support their horses.
Yeah.
Because if the horses are not eating well, then you can't go too far.
Damn.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, and then that's all the info. All the info was given by Marco Polo's people.
You can
And
go
then
very
he-
far though with horses and all that kind of, like, who knows how long you can live, but you can pack food for the horses too. Or
Yeah,
have
Yeah,
they-
No,
but-
they
I don't
did
know.
not. They did not. You do that. They did not pack food for the horses. They utilized the horses as a food source themselves.
But
That's
like
what- that's
they,
what I
they
mean,
needed,
like, you
they
can
needed,
last
they needed grass
as a warrior.
in the area.
You have a whole stack of meat, like we were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
right?
like a moving
they were-
refrigerator.
One of the
Or-
main reasons their victory over China was so decisive is because the Chinese did not know how to support themselves outside of walled cities, so they would have to bring what do you call them? Not
Caravans.
yeah, like trails and trails of
I
caravans for support, which they didn't need, which the Mongols didn't need. They would
Right.
just walk into the area as is
Just
and
eat.
utilize it.
Yeah, but like I had another idea about the Chinese Wall.
Wall.
Yeah, the
Well,
Great Wall of
Yeah,
China.
but a
It was
theory.
bought. That they got
Not
got
just
through-
no.
Why did the arrows point inwards? That's what.
But to me, it was more. The wall was built more to keep the people in than to keep the people out.
symbol, a symbol of we are it. Everything ends here. Yeah. No, I know.
It's not against the
The-
invaders.
No, China has always been reclusive, as in like we don't need the outside world. Like they've
Yeah,
never been
it's like-
out to get the world.
Yeah, it's the
they've
same
been
like,
they've been to
same
keep
like,
the world out.
Same like Japan.
Exactly. Yeah, I know the attitude. So
Yeah.
and the West is interestingly can never accept it. It can never think of China as not an enemy because of it. Because as China is
Because
progressing,
every single fucking Chinese looks at the white man as an enemy.
because they keep trying to get in, and they keep trying to get them out.
Yeah, right.
No,
but like
the Chinese mentality isn't about world domination. It never has been.
it was about me first, and then
Family and then so on and so forth. It's too limited in that.
Sounds familiar.
well, okay, gentlemen.
Yeah, we're,
thanks for inviting over.
Hey, buddy. It was a great discussion. We appreciate having you on the show.
Oh, it was still going.
It's on record.
Still going, yep.
Record. Don't use it against me. That's
Record
Oh.
of history.
Take care, man.
We won't use your real name, Tom.
Yeah. It's on my truck.
It's his English name. He got a
You
new
guys, like,
new
take
employer.
care.
Cheers, man. Have a good one.
All right, buddy.
See you too.
Yep. So we are
That was great. We are interrupted.
literally half
and
an
we're
hour
good.
away from the, let's call it, hard limit of this recording.
No,
And
we are
About to leave within 10.
We're about to leave within 5.
Well, even better.
Yeah, I'm afraid I can't
I
carry
mean-
this on. I mean,
No, we can
there's
totally conclude it on that. That was a amazing historical discussion, putting the model in perspective and all this kind of
context.
stuff. Just thinking about real history of what happened, to imagine a mobile guild, mobile through horse army, and this kind of stuff, and the
Uh,
juxtaposition of a natural army versus a market army, which are
Okay,
like
uh,
which manifest differently.
allow me
right?
to interject, if I may.
But cool that that's laid out, that we experienced that today,
For
that
sure,
that
for sure.
discussion.
Here's what I want to point out, is that the Dark Ages were, in particular, a relief from the system, and the Mongol horde, the Islamic horde, and so on and so forth, actually reinstated the market system back into
You were saying that you
civilization.
think the Dark Ages were a relief from this,
From authority, for the most part. Yeah,
and it was called dark because there was no progress,
there's
quote unquote.
no official records
But
to
also-
articulate quote unquote progress as to. There was no unified systemic effort
Was it
to
not-
to record things.
Was it then not somehow much more brutal in its time
So
span?
this is where there will be pockets of brutality and pockets of relief. So it wasn't a
Mhm.
perfect unified relief.
Yeah.
It was more of a kind of a
cultural thing,
claustrophobic, not claustrophobic. Sorry.
cultural context mapping overlay.
Yeah, there's no consistency in it. I wouldn't say that. So it would have been some spaces would have enjoyed a prolonged relief. Some spaces would not. Some spaces would only experience turmoil and so on and so forth. But the general statistical overall effect over the greater part of Europe was that a relief from authority and
So
a connection with working with the natural world in a more natural sense, and so leisure time increased overall. People's innate skills were what was developed, and so on and so forth. So there was that kind of relief.
that's
However,
kind of an
it
ideal
was
view,
short. In
which I'm
retrospective,
sure happened in
yeah.
in bubbles here and there. and all
Yeah,
that.
in retrospective, though, it's been immediately overrun by the market machine again, with the onslaught of the horde and the onslaught of Islam, and those two elements actually reinstated the market system, which resurged Europe into the Renaissance.
Okay, so this has to be definitely digested and interpreted and worked. But that's a pretty amazing thing to think that maybe that's what we thought that was the Dark Ages was actually just an unrecorded period of human freedoms. But is this
And it
like,
would never be interpreted as such, by the way, given the
blamed on Christianity for being so like
no.
so superstitional
So notice that
and
the
just
Dark
ruining all rational thought.
Right. The Dark Ages is actually termed, quote unquote, bad in the sense that no notable recorded progress is stemming out from it.
Right.
It
And this could be a story
and-
that we're told, which
Right.
boy, that fucking sucked. But
and it actually neglects
beca-
the element of freedom that I was mentioning.
right, we don't know that which it's one way or another, but
We do know that we know for a fact that there were pockets
of both.
of both distributed unevenly
As we would
and
expect.
more lottery.
There's no one or the other. It's context matters.
It's what
This happened here, that happened there.
Right. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that statistically speaking, overall, the average European quote unquote peasant had an element of relief from an authoritative system, in where the natural
Interesting.
modeling
So
of
like
life started
people
to take
people
root
just
again.
going about their business and doing their life may have found an unfound
This
previously freedom, which gave them the burst into potential that life loves, to escape the kind of constraints that mind puts down upon it, which are always wrong, which must have feedback, which brings us all back to the whole thing of this is what we're discussing, is how to deal with life as it goes on,
and
in a way that accumulates feedback properly.
And to drive that point slightly more home, this isn't the first. The Dark Ages isn't the first time this had actually happened.
Type of phenomenon.
fall of Greece saw similar phenomena in which individual city-states reasserted themselves.
Isn't that what we're looking at right now, kind of happening potentially? That
the glue might be too thick here.
there's a lot of cybernetic reinforcement.
Yeah. So in this case, what we were looking at is like the underlying glue system, if you will, is so thick that
it's insanely robust.
We can't actually try to do that again.
Nothing can fundamentally at the root kill this whole beast that's moving. That's why
Right.
that has nothing to
And
do
we're not trying to.
with what we're talking about. We are advancing and aligning, I guess,
An idea that works with it.
Yeah.
With it, creates a shelter within it, and
a
then
transitional
and by
idea.
that shelter allows a different dynamic to foster within it. So by recognizing the same system, it also tries to
And
recognize the
there's a lot of
older-
good in the system that people love. They love that things are convenient and available.
Well,
Everybody loves
yeah.
that, right? And that's to be cherished and
So okay,
extended.
to speak to that, here this is the entire reason, if you will, for not going against the grain specifically, and not trying to say fuck the system, if you will, but more
and just
to
destroy at all
realize
costs. The
your-
ultimate critical theory failure.
right is to instead is to recognize the exact plateau, specifically the tunneled reality plateau. Is that the plateau or the age? It doesn't matter. But the point being there is that with the recognition of the plateau, the artifact can be put back into place to give context to the rest of the scenario, such that all of that historicity, if you will, can be
Becomes our background.
re-injected back into the
And it becomes
mimetic framework.
our background in the moment. That this is what we're navigating. This is
And-
all here. We are taking care of all of this, and this is why a whole operating system comes up
So metaphorically speaking,
to deal with all of it.
Metaphorically speaking, this would be a way to realize your past lives, if you will, and understand the implication of their
Implications thereof.
influences and causality.
Well, we got about 10 minutes
No, we don't. We gotta run.
until,
We gotta run.
let's call it D minute. But thank you for anybody who's been with us live. I'm sure maybe some pop in, whatever. But it was.
Pleasure.
I feel good about it.
Yep.
Yep.
Mongolians.
As always, I think we successfully carried on from what we had established building up.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep, in the last session.
All right, man. Let's get her going.
Yep. In light of that,
Cheers.
you all